Good morning and welcome to the regular council meeting, Town of Qualicum Beach. I'd just like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Qualicum First Nation. With that, the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, Your Worship. Just one thing for changing the agenda. We do have a thing for proposed notice of motion protocol. Yep. I would just suggest that maybe we have a brief discussion in camera first prior to actually making a decision on that. And we do have an in-camera meeting today. It's the same report. So I just suggest that maybe we defer that till later this afternoon. And then if nothing comes up from that staff feels appropriate for in-camera, then we can just have it on the next regular meeting and make that decision then.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Is that agreeable with Council? Okay, so that's been taken off the agenda and forwarded to the in-camera meeting. Ms. Svensson.
Sorry, may I just clarify under which section are you proposing that we close under?
Discussion of staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Any other changes to the agenda? Then the agenda is adopted as amended by consent. And then we have the minutes. Any errors or omissions in the minutes of the meeting listed? Sorry, go ahead.
Just the consent agenda.
Oh, the consent agenda first,
My
yes. Great, thank you. Anything you want to discuss from the consent agenda? Councillor Skipsey?
I had just one question related to the fire department report. Oh, okay. So I noticed there was quite a significant spike, but when you dig in, it looks like it was mostly because of alarms. And I just wonder if that's sort of a one-off thing or if there's something that we should be aware of going forward.
Chief Connell.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, at times buildings do have glitches with their fire alarm system. It just happened that in January we had 2 buildings that had glitches with the fire alarm system, giving us a total of 8 more calls for those 2 buildings. Normally the glitches happen over multiple months. It just happened to be 1 month and everything happened there.
All right. Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, there was a letter that we also received about the tree bylaw. I'm not sure if maybe we should be discussing that maybe in camera. So just flagging it's a piece of correspondence, but I think I'll be probably talking about it in camera because it gets a bit tricky.
So what would you like to do with that?
Oh, sorry, and the soccer facilities. That was the one I really wanted to talk about. My apologies.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure, did you want to discuss that in camera?
No, the soccer facilities was just a brief question.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions regarding the consent agenda? Then the consent agenda is adopted by consent. Minutes of all the listed meetings, there's several of them. Any errors or omissions? Then those minutes are approved by consent. Then we have a rising from the minutes, and this was from the committee of the whole meeting. We can take it one at a time, or all 3 if you like. Councillor Skipsey, move all 3. Thank you. Councillor Harrison is seconding. Discussion. Councillor Vander Valk.
Thank you. I'm just wondering in point number 2, transportation infrastructure investments be prioritized in accordance with the Town of Qualicum Beach Community Transportation Plan. Is there a budget number to be attached to each of those priorities?
Mr. Hare.
Sorry, I was just looking over my report. Can you just repeat your question again?
In point number 2, where the transportation infrastructure investments are to be prioritized, I'm wondering if there is any monetary equivalent given to each of their priorities.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry for the little debate here. The individual projects we've talked about with the engineer and during the committee of the whole, we discussed also about having values for each of the projects. And because we're looking at a 30 and beyond timeline for these projects, the hundreds of thousands of dollars we'd spend getting construction costs for each of these projects, just to find out within 2 or 3 years the actual dollar value isn't valid anymore, is not a good use of taxpayers' dollars. So what we put forward is just a priority list based on the value, and by value I mean one project being more expensive than another, not actually valuing the specific dollar value. And further to that is in our budget we have $100,000 per year and then $150,000 in year 5 to go towards the age-friendly projects. As we do detailed conceptual and designs for these projects and apply for grants, we will populate further capital budgets with the actual dollar value for the projects. Because part of that is doing conceptual projects or project design so that we can apply for grants. And as soon as we know we have those grants in 2 or 3 years, then we'll actually put those in our capital budgets so that we can plan for those.
Okay, that makes sense. Councillor Skipsey?
Yeah, I think this issue was raised by a number of people at the Committee of the Whole, that unless it's sort of reflected in our budget, that these things may not be advanced, I guess. And like in the example of the traffic calming at the high school, I know that there are already drawings done and whatnot. It's in the top 5. You would think I would hope that maybe in the top 5 it would be done, or in the capital plan by the end of this term, or the 5 years that we're looking at. So I think it would be really helpful for council to at least have that on the radar and have it like a placeholder, as we have done with some of the other projects. So I don't know if we can ask staff to do that, or...
Well, we can, but like we said, it would take a lot of time to identify the cost, what currently would cost, but not 5 years from now. We've had the roundabout at Eagle Crest, Village Way and Island Highway on the books for some time. Some years ago it was $1 million, then it's $2 million, and the last roundabout was $3 million. So I think it's, in my opinion, not good use of staff time to identify every time when we have a project until we say, okay, let's go ahead with this one. We have rough estimates, and we can ask for rough ideas what it would cost. But to do a detailed analysis of the cost, that may not be applicable in a couple of years. So I think a rough estimate would be reasonable to ask, and that way, and they should be on the books, so people know, okay, it's on the list. But some are grant dependent, but some are more urgent for whatever reason. So I think to have that rough estimates, if that's practical, I would ask staff to look at that in the next round of budget discussion to see if there can be rough estimates applied. Councillor Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So exactly, that was going to be my request. If we could look at that in the next budget season, that's a significant amount of work, and putting something on the books means it's funded from reserves or grants or something like that. So we could do a memo as a lead up to the next round of budgeting to give council a good understanding of what we currently have estimates or plans for, and we can look at that for next year, so we can flag that as a subsequent improvement.
Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, and I actually agree. I think that's pretty reasonable, because the next 6 months, precisely the people who would be working to provide those estimates have their hands pretty full for the next several months. So I think it's pretty reasonable to next time around.
Thank you. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to clarify, those won't be detailed estimates. Those will be a very large dart in the dark, as we like to say. But I think we could give council more information.
Thank you. So any further discussion on those 3 recommendations? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we have some more from the January 24th Committee of the Whole meeting, and I think we can do them one at a time. Would someone care to make the first one? And they're on the list on the screen for everybody else. First 2, thank you. I have a seconder. Councillor Young, discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so I will be voting against this, but I do think the letter is actually well written. It's a good letter.
Thank you.
I just disagree with it, that's all.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. So with this further discussion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. No, not unanimously. Councillor Harrison opposed. Duly noted. Then there is some more staff comments, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Varela for discussion, if you'd like to bring any of this forward.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is arising from the last meeting, and I think we had quite robust discussion around it. We certainly our practice is, and this is again new for Qualicum Beach, is when we adjust those timelines for the strategic initiatives, we actually get council's endorsement so that you always know the current status of your strategic initiatives. So we're going to bring forward, once council gives us direction in this way, we'll bring you forward a revised list of your strategic initiatives with the timelines. It'll be attached as an appendix to your strategic plan. And going forward, when those timelines are changed or adjusted, we'll again get a council resolution. So there's always those breadcrumbs of your decision making, because these really are council's decisions.
Thank you. Would council like to move all 8? No, one at a time? Okay. We'll start with the first one, or the number 3 on the list. Councillor Harrison, you move that? Seconding. Councillor Skipsey, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried that one. Number 4. Councillor Skipsey? Councillor Harrison? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Number 5. Councillor Vander, Councillor Skipsey. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Number 6. Councillor Skipsey.
Can I just make a comment? That
Sure.
This one is actually redundant if we go ahead with the staff report, number 8.1b. So I think either we adopt it here or we adopt it later, but I don't think we need to adopt it in both places.
Well, it's on the screen now. Everybody can see it. Let's deal with it now. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Vander. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And then the number 7, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young. Discussion. Well, it's in your bailiwick, so I thought I'll let you make that motion. It's discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Number 8, Councillor Skipsey. I'll second that. Discussion. All in favor? Councillor, you want a discussion? Councillor Vander, Councillor Harrison.
Just maybe, I know we've talked about this a bit internally. I'm not sure if we've presented this totally to the public yet, so maybe if someone just wants to give a 2-second version of this, just so people aren't aware what the plan is for this.
Regarding the bridge?
Yes, precisely.
Okay. As you may know, some of you may know, when you play the golf course at Memorial, at number 5, which is where the washrooms are, you have to go across the ravine. And as one of the projects this year is to replace the culvert underneath East Crescent that takes the water from basically the heritage forest and beyond to the ocean. That culvert is collapsing, and we need to replace that. To do that, we'll have to close that road, and the work could take 3 to 4 months. During that time, the golf course probably has about 30,000 golfers, and if it's 4 months more than that want to get across to the other side to do their putting. So for a long time, there's been a plan to have a bridge from the tee to the green. And we've discussed it, but it's not that easy to build a bridge across a ravine like that with a stream inside. So yesterday, Councillor Skipsey and I met on site with the contractor who's done work for us on the other beach crossing by the roundabout. And we had someone from the fisheries there. And we think we can do it, but we haven't seen the final plan, nor have we seen it approved by Geotech, because it has to cross 2 areas that we need to make sure the load can be, those areas can bear the load. It looks like about a 160-foot bridge by 8 feet with concrete on top. So it's going to be a really nice bridge, and we think we can do it for $700,000. We would, at this point, expect the club to pay $350,000, and then the town has a provision in the budget for $700,000 in place. If it goes ahead, we're covered. And once it's done, if it gets done, then the golf course will have, in my opinion, a very successful year, as they have been in the past. And we probably can expect some payments towards the bridge the same year. But in the meantime, because of the complexity of the project, I think we just wait and see if the bridge actually gets approved by professionals, signed off by fisheries and everyone else that needs to sign off on it. I did mention it to Chief Rakama, because obviously when you do digging, you have to talk to the local First Nation. So Chief Rakama is aware of it, but there's a lot of issues that still need to be checked off. And at this point, I think what we have at this point is fine. Thank you. So with that, number 8, we moved and seconded. Ms. Councillor Vander Valk, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I also wanted clarification for that, because I think there are some people that aren't aware of the background information, so I think that's very useful. And just to emphasize that the golf course is the town, and the town is the golf course, so we're helping golfers and we're helping the town, so that's all.
Just for some background on that, we've had a new clubhouse built for $2.35 million. The club has squirreled away about $1 million, but that money was surplus, and according to the lease, some of that would have come to the town, but we said, no, keep it and build a new clubhouse, which they did. And just like with the other infrastructure projects, when they had the old clubhouse on the corner of West Crescent and Memorial, that building or something like it could have been built for $1 million. But by the time construction came and the drawings were done, and it's a lot more interesting clubhouse than there was before. Plus, there were issues that changed things because of the archaeological concerns, and also additions to the building that the council wanted or suggested that we should build a porte cochere on it. But in the meantime, they've made 15 payments, $50,000 each, so they're a very good partner. It's like asking you to build a house that we own and then you rent it from us. So it's been a really good deal for the town. They're also paying lease payments of $76,000 a year, which, as far as I know, is more than we collect in taxes for the town's portion, at least, from Eagle Crest and Pheasant Glen combined. So we're not providing cheap golf, but we need. I think their fees are the same as what Aerosmith charges for 18 holes, and the same as what Eagle Crest charges for the current 9 holes. So the town is doing really well by having a volunteer board looking after all these things and paying us a solid lease every year, plus paying off the buildings that you all own. So I think working with them, we may find another way to resolve the issue where they have to come up with half the money, but we'll work on that once the bridge is done and see how we can make this work. And it may come in below budget. There may also be some grant money involved. So with that, Councillor Young.
I'd like Mr. Hare from the Finance Department clarify the accumulated surplus funds is where we're drawing the $350,000 for the town portion. I just want to make sure that we still have a lot in that account. And then the other portion is $350,000 from the water utility reserve. So I also want to make sure that we have lots in there to be drawing from.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Young.
Yeah.
Both of those funding sources do have adequate funding to be able to draw from. If you take a look at the reserve schedule in your preliminary budget book, the accumulated surplus balance is estimated at just in excess of $1 million. I can't remember the exact amount, but it's over $1 million. And the Water Reserve Fund does have funds that you aren't required in the next 5 years that can be borrowed from or drawn from. So essentially what you would be doing is borrowing from the Water Fund Reserve to the General Fund Reserve. It's through community charter rules or apply, and we've looked at those as well. So you can borrow from one reserve fund to another one to fund projects.
But with Bill 44, if we're going to have more density, won't we need some infrastructure retrofits?
I believe for now, the 5-year financial plan, actually, I'm going to let Luke answer that question.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Young. And it is a good question, and it's one that our engineering team will be looking at in this first 6 months of the Bill 44 implementation to review our servicing that is currently in place and forecasting moving forward what we will be needing. So it's a little bit premature to assume that we'll need upgrades. It's also premature to assume that we have everything in place. So maybe if you could just stay tuned on that one. We will be bringing updates as soon as there's information available. Thank you.
And when we were designing the crossing of the over the culvert, we were looking at widening it so the golfers and other people, pedestrians, cyclists could go there, and that would have cost another $575,000. So I thought, rather than doing that, let's focus on a bridge, which can be done before we open up the culvert, so the season continues. And the other thing I forgot to mention, small detail, they also built a maintenance yard for I think it was $900,000, and they borrowed $650 from the town, but they also paid $300,000 in advance to just pay that. Plus, they've made payments of $35,000 a year on top of the lease and on top of the payments for the clubhouse. And they built a new cart shed for the storage of all the golf carts for $100,000 that you just paid for out of surplus. And these are all town assets now, so I think they're doing really well. Thank you. With that, I think that's a complete picture. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Then the fossil fuel class action lawsuit, Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, there were a number of questions that came up, and we were asked to provide responses to some of those. I'm just trying to find my piece of paper here that had the, where did it go? I knew I was going to do that. Sorry. Sorry. It was here a minute ago. There was responses that were forwarded to us on January 25th from the delegation addressing some of the concerns that were raised. And if I can find that piece of paper, I'll read from some of them. But this is really about investing $1 now as protection against costs that the town will incur. We're expected to incur because of climate change, and we already are incurring some costs because of that. And at this point, it is a commitment to review the legal opinion as to why this class action lawsuit is doable and recommended. And also then we have to wait until there's about $500,000 committed from other municipalities. So it would be approval now, but the action probably won't happen for some time. And for those of you that think that perhaps government shouldn't be involved in class action lawsuits, I just would note that currently the provincial government has a class action lawsuit against some large pharmaceutical companies because of the opioid crisis. And they have settled with one of the large companies and for $150 million, and then the challenge is still ongoing. The other thing is that the delegation has gone out and solicited some pledges to offset some of the costs. So for those people who don't want their one tax dollar going towards this, there's over $1,000 that has been pledged to cover those people. But generally, people in Canada, when surveyed, did say that they support governments taking action against climate change, and so I think this is something that we can do. I really feel that this is something that it's going to be one of those things that we look back on and say, I'm really glad we did that we protected the town and our taxpayers for these large costs that we anticipate incurring in future. So I'll leave it at that. But it has been moved and seconded.
Councillor Young?
My question is there not a law firm that would take this on a contingency basis? Usually class action lawsuits are on a pro bono basis, and I feel that if we give $1 to a law firm, down the road, they're going to ask for more dollars, and I don't feel we need to commit to the unknown. I also feel that it's wonderful. I think this is a great initiative to recognize that fossil fuel causes climate change, and kudos to the people that are pushing this forward. But I do believe this is something that should be in a broader organization presentation. It should be given to the United Nations or an organization like that. It should be, when we say that we're recognizing Tegan outside from our local high school that is protesting climate change and asking people to be cognizant of our environment, it should be like Greta Thunberg, who has gone to the world organizations to bring this presentation forward. So in that respect, I'm not in favor of this.
Councillor Skipsey? Yeah.
Well, I'll just say that it's local governments that are going to be incurring the cost, and it's our taxpayers that are going to be incurring the cost. The, you know, the greater organizations aren't going to be here putting back together infrastructure after wildfires or flooding and whatnot. We're going to be on the hook for that money. So I think it is appropriate for local governments to protect themselves.
Any comment about future costs if this proceeds?
My understanding is that, and this might be part of what we receive as the legal opinion, and if there are red flags, then we could certainly put us, you know, say, okay, that's enough for now, or we'll think about it and look into those things. But my understanding is that if it does get approved by a judge, then there would be other fundraising initiatives that would take place, and there's other organizations that would get behind it if it was deemed to be worthy or have the potential to be successful.
Okay, Councillor Vanderval, Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, I just think that it is, there's no question that we're in a climate change crisis. You just have to look at all the flooding that's going on. And in our own area with last summer, the heat dome and the fires. And I think that it is time to take action. And this is a fairly small action for us to take at this time. We do need to wait for the legal opinion, and there are other municipalities that are going to be pledging as well, and they need a minimum of $500,000 before anything more happens. So as Councillor Skipsey mentioned, I think it's going to be a while before anything actually needs to happen. And I think it is necessary for us to take action. All you have to do is look at all the COP talks, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And the larger organizations, I think, have a more difficult time affecting any kind of change. So I think it is up to us, and I think it's time to act, and I would be in favor of this.
Thank you. Councillor, Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, so just one point on point A is RV Finley one of the firms that be participating in this? So just if the folks who are doing the review aren't the same people we're giving the money to is essentially what I'm asking.
Councillor Skipsey?
I believe they're not involved in the class action.
Okay. Yeah, and like our town lawyers, this isn't really their bailiwick, so it wouldn't make sense to refer it to our own legal counsel because they do municipal stuff, they don't do this. Yeah. And bluntly speaking, they would probably give us a very hefty bill because their time is very expensive. Okay, I just wanted to check that one thing. For the broader arguments about this, I mean, I sort of made that in the previous meeting, so there's no point really reiterating the last meeting on this. My only question is, are we making a decision right now, or is this just sort of more for information that we're waiting for that legal opinion and then we'll make a decision on it?
Yeah, as far as I read it, that we would require to get a legal opinion first. And Councillor Skipsey is on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then, just for clarity, would we then be voting on this now, or are we just sort of informing the public that we're getting a legal opinion from an independent firm, and then when that's presented, we'll be voting on it then?
Councillor Skipsey?
Well, I think we need the direction of council in order for me to obtain that legal. So there has to be some commitment from the town. So we could add a C and then say something, or, you know, that we could add something to say that it would come back once we've reviewed the legal opinion, certainly.
Okay, we need the wording of that. Meantime, Councillor Vander, you have your microphone on. Were you expected to speak more? Okay, Councillor Young.
I just need clarification. Isn't it staff that gets the legal opinion and not a councillor?
Normally, we do, but we didn't want to burden staff with more work. That was the idea, that we could inquire and get a legal opinion from the people that made the delegation through them to find out what's going on. But the legal opinion for us, for the town, would come probably through MIA, which has a provision where you can have free advice for the first while to see if we need a legal opinion and go from there. Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I do think this is worth clarifying for the public because it is unusual. The notice of motion came forward at the January 17th meeting. The staff comment at that time advised council we were at capacity and we couldn't take this on. Council then said they would take the charge on this, pulling together the information, whatever learning had to be done, those sorts of things. And the legal opinion, if publicly available, is available to anyone. So the idea is it would be a legal opinion that was publicly available. If that isn't the case, again, staff don't have the time to pull that apart, then staff would anticipate council would come back to us and we would have a subsequent discussion. But anybody could get a legal opinion that is open. And again, I acknowledge this is unusual, but that was council's direction.
So we need something to say that after we receive the legal opinion, this will come back for council for further direction.
Well, I think it does actually say that in the motion. Council obtaining a copy of the legal opinion on such a lawsuit prepared by the law firm to satisfy itself that there is a solid legal basis for the claim. So if this were to be approved, then I could go out and get the legal opinion and distribute it to council, and then we can come back and confirm that we want to proceed.
Yes, but I think it's good to spell that out. So there should be a C, that after obtaining this legal opinion, council will consider the matter. That's number C. So I just need to make sure staff has that. Okay. Councillor Young.
I also want to add that we do use fossil fuels in heating our homes and transportation, tents, even the homeless, their tents. It all is from fossil fuel. So are we being hypocritical to say they themselves are responsible, or is it us, the consumers? I also feel that when it comes to the emissions, we're not the country that's on the top of the list. China and the US are on the top. And for this lawsuit to be successful coming from a small group of people, like from just a small part of the province, how would they be able to settle it for us if they don't recognize the emissions that's causing climate change throughout the whole world? So I really believe that this should be brought to a United Nations forum and not locally. Sorry.
Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, so the only thing for me is just that procedure just seems a little bit weird that we're resolving we're going to do this, and then we're also going to have an amendment that we're going to review it when we get the opinion later. So one of the things for me would be that shouldn't we then just wait till we get the opinion and then make the full vote then? Because I do think that there's, forgive me, I don't want to get ahead of the vote, but I think this is still going to pass. But I'm just kind of confused how we can say we're definitely doing this, we're resolved to do this, the amount of money we're contributing, but then we'll review the decision subsequently again after we've made the decision. That's just the part that I find a little bit tricky.
It is a bit, if you put it that way, but I think it's clear that we're going to get a legal opinion, and maybe we can just do A and C. That might make more sense, and just wait for the legal opinion for us to review and go from there. So I think if we just vote on A and C and leave the other piece out, would that work? Ms. Svensson.
So right now, we have an amendment on the floor that you've moved. I don't have a seconder for that amendment, which is adding C.
Okay, well, let's, I think C is necessary, that we come back to council. So can we vote on, I'll make an amendment that says we add C, but we take out B. Councillor Skipsey?
Well, why don't we just vote on A? Because then it's just the council obtaining a legal opinion of such a lawsuit prepared by the firm, and then to satisfy itself that there is a solid legal basis for the claim.
Yes, but the point is, it has to come back to council. Right. So how do we word A so that's clear? Councillor Harrison?
If I may, why not just do it as two separate motions then? Because I do support C. I think that's a good idea. I'm not sure I support A. So I'm in a bit of a bind that half of it I actually support and the other half I don't. So I think if we just do A by itself, to Councillor Skipsey's point, right, that gives a clear direction that this is something Council's going to do. And then we do a separate motion. Sorry, Heather, I'm not trying to make your, oh, sorry, Ms. Svensson, I'm not trying to make your job more difficult. But then we have C, that we request this be brought back once that legal opinion is being received.
Okay, so to make it clear, oh, I got two hands up on that side. I'll go with Ms. Varela first.
I was trying to get your hand to direct you back, to, your eyes, sir,
okay.
to get you back to your corporate services staff. So if she could make a recommendation, please.
Thank you. We need to be concise. We've got a delegation coming and we need to finish this up. I think it's clear that council wants a legal opinion and come back to this forum. Councillor Skipsey. Oh, sorry, not Councillor Skipsey. Councillor Ms. Svensson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The motion that's in the agenda is already on the floor, so I think we just leave that alone. Just make a new motion, leave this as it is, and make a new motion, moving in seconding that council obtain the legal opinion and that the matter be referred back to staff after the legal opinion has been attained for council's consideration.
Okay.
So
Does that
if we
make
move
sense?
and second at that.
Okay. Councillor Vander Valk?
Would it be referred back to staff because staff doesn't want to be involved?
Referred back to council.
Right.
Refer
Thank
back
you.
to council. Okay, so can we type that out so we can see what we're actually voting on?
Ms. Gould's in a different presentation. It's not live on there now, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you read out what we're voting on,
Sure.
that'll be fine.
The council,
But let's withdraw the other motions and deal with this one, which is in one motion and concise. Do you have it? Okay, and Councillor Harrison, you're moving A and C?
Well, what I was just thinking is that we just vote on essentially what's in the agenda. As Ms. Svensson mentioned, it's sort of been moved already. And then the whole amendment thing, C, we do that as a separate motion afterwards.
That makes sense to me. Okay, so the motion with A and B, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Harrison opposed. And to move C, which is it's not on there right now, but it's to bring this back to council. That's right. Okay, so with that, and a mover and a seconder. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you very much for your help, staff, and for council. Very patient, but we get there eventually. So, Councillor, there's motions there from Councillor Harrison, and we talked about perhaps looking at combining these three sections. Councillor Harrison, I'll leave it with you.
Yeah, so the mayor and I spoke on Monday about this. We had a bit of a lengthy conversation. And sort of, it's a different direction from this, but we did talk about how, in terms of working with VIHA, having support for some sort of service, we gave VIHA land ages ago. And it's right there, it's a service, its services are right next door. And so my suggestion is that essentially all this stuff, sort of, forgive me, it's on there, there's ideas are out there, but we go in a different direction and just send a letter to VIHA reminding them you have free land in town. And if you want to do something, that would be wonderful. And the reason I was trying to do this is that when David Eby put forward his first budget, there was $1 billion for mental health. And I'd love to see some of that money invested in Qualicum Beach. But I don't think we really need to do anything as a town, because we've already done it ages ago. We gave them land, it's worth a lot of money. And then essentially what I'd be suggesting is that, I do have it written up, and I can just send it as an email to staff, but just instead of all of this, that all this gets withdrawn, and then we just send a letter to VIHA reminding them that the land is there, and if you want to do something, that would be lovely.
Thank you. So that would affect on page 5 of your agenda, the notice of motion, the pending motion, and then staff comments could all be wrapped into one thing by you moving that we advise the province, Island Health, that there is land available at Eagle Park, which has the ambulance station and a care facility, and that facility was designed so it could be mirrored with all the mechanical there, the parking is there, everything is there. So, Councillor Harrison, if you would like to make a motion that we advise the Ministry of Health, the Premier, that we have land available for them to build medical services that would deal with these requests.
Yeah, so what I've written down is that a letter be sent to VIHA, the Premier and the Ministry of Health, detailing the land previously given by the town to VIHA, and that the town would be supportive of further investments at that location.
Thank you.
And I'll just send that in an email to staff in a little bit, sorry.
And I'll second that discussion. Councillor Vander.
Yeah, I have concerns if it is going to be assumed that the land, that the town agrees with the land being used for these purposes that were mentioned in the previous discussions. If that be the case, then I don't agree with that. I think it needs to be clarified what the intention would be in terms of reminding the province that they own the property and asking that we, the town, have input into how it's going to be, what is going to be built there, what kind of facility. I think that, first of all, well, mostly, the town we need our own mental health facilities for residents. There's a lot more cases of dementia, Alzheimer's, depression, and those are more specific to residents in the town. And I think that we also need generally more health care. So I would request that we look at, if we're going to remind the province that they own that property, that we be more specific about how we would like to have the land used to the benefit of the town and the town residents. So I don't think we can just say, yes, we're going to send them a letter and they can do whatever they want. I think we should say, this is what we would like to have, whether it be a walk-in clinic, whether it be an extension of complex care, whatever. I don't think it's a good idea just to say, here, you've got it, build what you want, and don't consider what the town wants.
There's a restriction on the land, of the use of the land, and that has to be for healthcare services. So it is already restricted for that. They can't just say, well, build condominiums. So whatever the health authority deems necessary to have in our community, and we can't ship everybody to Nanaimo, we have land that I always thought would be could be used for mental health, could be used for other services that are part of the health authority's mandate. I think when they come up with a plan to add to the building, I'm sure they'll come back to town to say, this is what we plan on building. Councillor Harris.
What might satisfy then Councillor Vander Valk's concern is if the letter was brought forward to a future council meeting, and then sort of like the Ministry of Housing letter, where it's sort of something we sort of went over prior to issuing it, if we have that same sort of process for this. Just because the conversation with Mayor Westbrook, I think the number of health ministers he's talked to, we almost got to the second hand with a number of times he's reminded people in his career that the land's there, and everyone says, oh, that's wonderful, great, we'll get right on it, and then there's an election, and great, we'll get right on it, and there's election. So I do think Councillor Vander, though, does have a good point, that we shouldn't just assume what they'll do, and providing a bit of guidance for what the majority of council wants to see would be entirely reasonable.
Since it's your kind of what you've been trying to advance, would it be reasonable for you to have a kind of a draft letter, send it to staff, and it comes back to a future council meeting? Would that be reasonable for everybody? That would be similar to the letter to the Minister of Housing, that we have some kind of a concept of what it looks like? Because I wrote that letter to begin with, but not like it is now. It's much better than it is now, but I started it. So if you would start that, and then we'll bring it back to a future council meeting. So a motion to refer this to a future council meeting to consider the draft letter to the Minister of Health. Councillor Young.
Could we have the letter as a follow-up to when you, along with the other local mayors, did the red door, blue door housing proposal? Because in their response in October, it did say that there is going to be complex care housing for up to 500 people is in their budget. They say that in Nanaimo, they will have 30 coming up by 2025, and they propose that they will have more, up to 240 units of complex care housing across BC. So maybe following up on their response to this, but also still keeping Eagle Park for long-term care, because it is a huge need here because of the seniors that we have.
I'm sure we can keep the Minister Whiteside's letter in mind when we write this. So on that, I second your motion, Councillor Vander.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on your comment, actually, about having to transport people to other places. Specifically, I think you may have said Nanaimo, but I think we have to also realize that a great number of people, I believe, are being transported to, well, I know one that's going to Cowichan Lake for a family member that has dementia, and there is no space for them to be locally. So my concern is that we do need to look after these people that already have, well, people that have these mental health issues. And mental health does need to be looked at in a broader form. That's all.
Thank you. The letter will come back for council consideration. And I think Councillor Harrison commented that he understands your point, so we'll make sure it's included. Further discussion, Councillor Skipsey.
Can we just get clarification on the recommendation that we're voting on, please?
The motion is it'll come back to council with a draft letter to the minister.
Do we have a seconder for the deferral?
I skipped it. I second it.
You moved the deferral. Who seconded the deferral?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So we're voting on the deferral.
Yes. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. We're getting there, folks. It's a big agenda.
Sorry.
Ms. Svensson?
Yes, on the bottom of page 5, you have a motion on the floor from February 7th. I would ask that you please vote on that and defeat
No,
it.
all that is now gone.
You
It's
have
all
to
been
vote on
withdrawn.
it. You have to vote. It's on the floor.
Oh, I thought we withdrew all that.
You would have to withdraw that motion
Yeah.
formally.
Yeah, okay. I move that we withdraw that motion. Councillor Harrison, seconded. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegations. Sorry you had to make you wait, guys. Qualicum Beach District Curling Club. The floor is yours. And I want to start off by saying how much I appreciated the event that was held a few weeks ago. It was an awesome success to have the firefighters and police there. And I think your hosting committee, including our staff member, Don Marshall, you guys did a super job. So thank you. Thank you. If you push the button at the base, push the button. There you go.
You can hear me now. Thank you. My name is John Evans. I'm the chair of the Qualicum Curling Club, and I have Stu Shaw with me and Daryl Snedden. We are all volunteer directors for the 15 board members that we have. I'm relatively new to the community and very new to the curling club, but I have curled all around British Columbia, and we have a gem. This is a great facility. We have grown from 330 members to 400 members just in the past year. That's correct. And everybody is engaged, and that's what's really impressive about this club. A lot of our capital projects that we do, and I don't want to steal any thunder from Stu, but everybody gets involved. We did a painting project this summer, and we had to turn people away because we had so many that were coming out to assist. So it's a really great club to be a part of. I'm glad that you enjoyed that. Last year we also hosted teams from Scotland, which was another great event. So we have an annual budget of about just under $300,000. Our expenses have grown, and we do have a few issues that we have. We have a 60-year-old building, much like anything else. Like myself, I'm also turning 60, and things break down after a while. So and I'm going to refer to Stu here to cover some of those capital projects that we have coming up. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Council, Your Worship, and Administration for including us in the agenda. Our lease agreement that we have set up with the town that runs through to the end of this year, it's actually a 10-year lease with it's 5 years locked in with a 5-year reopener if there's no issues by either party. Part of it is to present to the town a 5-year capital plan and looking for approval for the current year expenditures. So we've done that, and that's part of our package. Ms. Gould, if you could probably go right to towards the end of the package there. It's it's very detailed. I'm going to focus on this end of it. So our capital formula that we have set up is all capital projects for the facility are financed in a three-pronged approach. First of all, the town looks after a portion of it related to the building. The curling club, our volunteer organization, looks after expenditures for such things as rocks, curling equipment, leasehold improvements, etc. And then we have shared finance projects such as our curling infrastructure and ice plant replacement. Presently, what we've set up with the town is a reserve account that both parties have contributed to, and that sits at, and it's for future replacement of infrastructure related to the ice facility, and it's sitting at $110,000 plus interest. Each party contributes $3,750 annually to build that reserve. Part of our 5-year plan I'm going to focus on for the town is presented, but I want to focus on 2024. We have 6 projects we're looking for approval for the town. It's changed a little bit for 2024 based on an inspection we had from Technical Safety BC last fall. We were assigned a new inspector who notified us of a number of upgrades that are required to meet new and current safety standards. These updates are critical to the facility to allow us to operate. Majority of these upgrades are building related, therefore impacts the town's budget. And I'm going to kind of go through those. First of all, we have a mechanical room building upgrade. So part of the inspection report that we received was we need to isolate our refrigeration system for safety purposes. To do so, we're going to need to build a separate wall and a door within our mechanical room. The estimated cost for this is $4,000, but the curling club will volunteer the labor to do it, so a net cost to the town of $2,000. The second phase of this project is actually building a new addition to the facility. With the existing mechanical room being isolated, we don't have any then capacity to put our ice scraper and our maintenance equipment. So we're going to need to add an extension to the side of our building to do so. Part of that will also include a cement pad to move equipment in and out of the building. With this, we're assuming that we'll be in partnership with the town for things like engineering, so we haven't included that in there because we work with the town on the drawings and plans and engineering. Without that, we've estimated the cost of this addition to be $35,000. Again, because of some of the great talent we have in our curling club, we'll volunteer labor to build it, and the net cost to the town would be $25,000. This project we need to get going as soon as possible to meet the requirements. Technical Safety BC, we did get an extension. They were looking for some resolution in this fairly quickly. We said we can't do any of this work until the curling season is done. They've given us that extension, but we need to get going right after the season, which would be in April. The third phase of this project is mechanical room ventilation addition. New standards require a ventilation system be added to the refrigeration equipment to exhaust any refrigerant should there be a leak. This project, because it is part of the ICE infrastructure, would actually be a shared finance project. We've estimated this project to cost $12,000. Now, what we've discussed internally within our board, and that is, and we'd like to present this as an option to the town, is because it's part of our infrastructure, and to minimize the impact to both parties' budgets, we'd actually draw from our $110,000 reserve account for this. So it wouldn't hit the current capital budget for either party, but would be a balance sheet item on the town that would impact. So both parties basically are pulling out $6,000 for this particular project. The fourth project is a safety railing addition. Right now we have our old chiller that sits on the roof of the building. It's not operating, but it's decommissioned, but it requires an annual inspection as part of our annual inspection. It doesn't have a railing at present, and they've notified us that it doesn't meet WorkSafe BC, so we need to add a railing. We priced that out at $3,500, but just recently we've been discussing, and one of the plans we have is actually a roof replacement project. The town facilities people have worked with some of our staff to be looking at the roof. And so we've discussed, well, why don't we just put in a temporary wooden railing that could meet the needs? And if we do that, the cost is approximately $1,000. So it would reduce those costs. And that would be contingent on making sure that the roof does get done, because the temporary structure wouldn't last long. The fifth project that we have in the 2024 budget impact in town is actually a carryover from 23. We had our lounge washrooms upgraded, did a great job, tons of great comments on it. Unfortunately, one of the vendors, we had some defects to our flooring, and until those are resolved, we haven't paid that invoice, therefore we haven't invoiced the town for it. That project in total was $15,000. We've spent $11,000 to date. That was a $3,000 item, so we haven't paid that, therefore it would impact the 2024 budget. And finally, the sixth item is the $3,750 annual contribution to the account that both parties have. So the total 2024 budget that we're looking for capital approval is $43,250. However, if we use the trust account and we put in the temporary railing versus permanent, we actually are estimating that the impact to the town would be $34,750, which we're looking for approval. As it is a 5-year plan, I want to quickly highlight what else we have in the hopper plan for the next 4 years. 2025, we have $15,000 planned for replacing the lounge flooring. It's worn, it has some safety issues because of some boards moving a little bit. We're kind of keeping it safe, but it needs to be replaced. That was going to be planned for this year, but because of the priority of these mechanical room issues, we're deferring it to 25. We would do the volunteer demo and subfloor work, and then the net cost to the town would be $15,000. In 2026 is where we're looking at the roof. We are realizing we're experiencing some leaks. The town's been very good in working with us on those projects, but it needs to be replaced at some point. It will involve removing the old chiller and some insulation upgrades. The town has been involved in looking at some of that, but it's a fairly big project and would be a town-led project. We haven't got any budget on that one as of date. 27, we've got planned back deck replacement. We did some work this summer to do some maintenance, repairs, and very economically. We volunteered all the labor to do it. It's very functional and safe now, but its lifespan is coming to an end, and also it's really an area that's not used much, and we'd like to replace it. Again, we do some volunteer labor on this, and the net cost in 27 we're estimated $15,000. The final item on our 5-year plan is we kind of had this on the books for a while. We keep moving it around. It's not a priority, but it is something we're still keep in consideration. There's a disability access lift from our main floor to the lounge, and that would allow wheelchair access up to the lounge to watch from upstairs. Presently, they can watch from the main floor, and we have our disability washrooms downstairs. That particular project's budgeted at $12,000. So that's a total. It's approximately $80,000 for over the 5 years if you take out the annual contributions, which would be another $18,000. So that's it. I open it for any questions, comments.
Well, first of all, thank you for the work you do. Just like with the golf course, to have a board of volunteers managing this with some volunteer workers, really, really attractive for the town of Qualicum Beach to be partners with you. Councillor Harrison.
Just briefly, I just want to echo what the mayor was saying. I appreciate all the hard work you guys do, and I've seen some of the renovation work that you've put the hours into, and it's really quite impressive. So yeah, we get pretty good value for the amount of money we spend versus the facility we get. Thanks so much.
Anyone else? And it was also a real eye-opener last year when we had that match play against Parksville, which because of Rob Diag telling me how to actually do it, we won. But the whole atmosphere is just a wonderful place to come, whether you're colder or not. So well done. And we'll take all these considerations, all these numbers in consideration. Our financial administrator has taken copious notes of all the things you said, and if you could present him a hard copy of that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
And you don't feel you have to stay for the rest of the meeting if you don't want to. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, zoning amendment, Rupert Road East, Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I do have some slides on this one, but I'll go ahead and get started in terms of summarizing where we are. So this next item is a zoning amendment application for 230, 250, and 270 Rupert Road East. This is a project that actually came first before council in 2022, so it's been quite a while. So council introduced a bylaw that would amend the zoning for this property from the current zone, which is A3, to a zone that would permit an additional dwelling unit. And now that the slide's up, I'll just briefly describe where we are and what is existing on the site now. So this area outlined in white is a single parcel that has 3 strata parcels on it. So it's been stratified, two residential dwellings, and then there's a garden center, which was constructed more than a decade ago for the purpose of a garden center. At that time, the property owner put it into the agricultural land reserve so that it could operate as a garden center, which was a slight variance to the town's zoning bylaw at the time. So since that, the garden center went out of business, and it's essentially sat vacant for a long time. So in 2022, it came before council. The request was twofold. One, to authorize a submission to the Agricultural Land Commission to remove that portion of land from the Agricultural Land Reserve, and then secondly, to introduce the zoning bylaw. So since that time, since 2022, the Agricultural Land Commission has authorized the removal of this land from the Agricultural Land Reserve. They recognize that it was put in recently and solely for a single purpose, which was the garden center, which isn't really considered to be a viable agricultural use at this time. So that decision was made. Their process is still ongoing. However, they have authorized its removal. So if that were to proceed, then this would be outside the Agricultural Land Reserve, and the land reserve boundary would start on the south, which is what it would have been in 2007 before the process of adding it to the Agricultural Land Reserve was commenced. This is a diagram showing the 3 parcels right now. So there's 1 residential dwelling, 2nd dwelling, garden center. If this zoning amendment proceeds, then the garden center property would be renovated to provide an additional dwelling unit. And there already is an existing strata parcel there, so there wouldn't be a change to the actual strata division of the parcel. Okay, I'm going to walk through these recommendations because there's quite a few and there's a lot of text on the screen. So the first recommendation is that we rescind the reading of the bylaw from 2022. It's been a long time. There's been some procedural changes since then, and it's just a cleaner approach if we can step back, take away that bylaw reading that we did in 2022, and then start fresh with a new process. So if council does endorse that, the second part here is a change to procedure that council will see more frequently moving forward, and that is explicitly stating by way of a resolution compliance with the official community plan. And that's something to do with Bill 44, because if an item complies with the official community plan, then there cannot be a zoning, or there cannot be a public hearing on that item. So it's better to state things explicitly than to assume later on and have to repeat. So council would state compliance with the official community plan. And then recommendations 3, 4, 5, and 6 would actually advance the bylaw as it is before you today. And it's a bit unusual in terms of the town's past history, but the recommendation today is actually to give 4 readings to this bylaw. So take it from the point of the first reading all the way through to adoption, rather than spacing it out over multiple meetings. And I'll describe why that recommendation is where it is before you today. So recognizing that it is being removed from the agricultural land reserve, there actually is no viable use of the actual garden center building anymore. So the only reason it could be used as a garden center was because it's in the agricultural land reserve. It's too big to be used as an accessory building because it's on a separate parcel, and there's actually, I mean, it could be used maybe for some agricultural use, but clearly over the last 15 years it's been shown that there isn't an agricultural use that's viable in there, especially when you take away garden center. So retail is out. So essentially we have a building that has been orphaned between 2 regulatory systems. Not in the ALR anymore, so can't do the garden center. The town's zoning bylaw doesn't really permit much of anything either. So recognizing that it's caught between these 2 worlds, staff would recommend just proceeding all the way through the process and moving all the way through adoption today. That way the process would be concluded, and rather than it reappearing on future agendas, it's more efficient to complete the process today. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
I have a few questions. Let's see, where do I start? First of all, in the documentation that was provided to us, the letter from the ALC said that the chair had the authority to reverse the decision in 60 days, and so that they advised us not to do anything that would maybe affect if there were a change coming. So the second thing is that, as far as I understand, our procedure bylaw and the community charter still says that we can only give 3 readings to a bylaw at one time. And in the community charter, it's specific that it has to be, maybe this isn't, it is a bylaw, that it has to be 24 hours between 3rd reading and final adoption. And then the other thing is that when we started down this process way back when, I've always thought that this piece of property and the garden center, there might be another use for it other than simply residential. And I wondered if there is some kind of zoning that could be introduced that would be a bit more flexible in the use. I think because of its location next to the fire hall and the proximity to town and whatnot, that perhaps even some kind of institutional or public use or something. And I don't know whether that is only if it's the owner that's interested in that, or if the town has the ability to just sort of expand the the zoning.
Thank you, Ed. With your indulgence, I'll start with the last question and hopefully move backwards to the other ones. So one unique aspect of this property is because it's a strata, the other strata property owners in the subdivision have to approve of the proposed use. So they have consented to an application to apply to turn it into a residential dwelling. I wouldn't assume at this point, I wouldn't be comfortable assuming that they would authorize a zoning amendment for, expanded suite of uses that they may not be comfortable having immediately adjacent to the residential dwelling. So that if there was interest on the part of the property owner to advance this and they had consent of the other strata owners, that is something we could consider, but I wouldn't be comfortable making that assumption. Okay, so stepping back to the number of readings that can be given. So you are correct that the community charter puts a limit on bylaw readings so that you can do 3 readings and then you have to wait 24 hours and then you can adopt. However, that doesn't apply to land use bylaws. So for example, the zoning bylaw and the official community plan, there's a separate provision that specifically states that, notwithstanding all that other stuff, you can give 3rd reading and adoption on the same day. So that does exist. And with the new Bill 44 provisions, where the public hearing has been eliminated, then that essentially removes the only procedural requirement not to complete the entire process in one meeting. So that is something that has come up in recent legal briefings. So staff are, based on the information that we have up to this point, this is a legal process in compliance with the Community Charter and Local Government Act. Okay, so stepping back to the first question, that would be the letter from the Agricultural Land Commission. Yes, it does state, that it can be reversed within that period of time. So if it were reversed, I would remind council that council also has the authority to, make changes and pivot should the circumstances change, and suddenly they've reversed the decision to take it out of the Agricultural Land Reserve. Council would have another decision to make, but it wouldn't necessarily invalidate the decision that could be potentially made before council today. So I think I covered the questions from Councillor Skipsey. If I missed one, if you could please remind me, that would be great. Thank you.
That's a foregone conclusion that you'll be reminded.
There was only one, and that was our own procedure bylaw, whether we would still be in compliance with our procedure bylaw.
No, thank you. And if, with your indulgence, I would refer that to Ms. Svensson. Are you aware of a requirement in the procedure bylaw? Thank you.
No, the community charter would trump that. So if Mr. Sales is confident with the 4 readings, then the community charter would comply.
Councillor Harrison.
I actually want to echo what Councillor Skipsey said on 2 points. One is the 60-day point. Reason being is that behind the fire hall, there's some ALR land that the town owns. And I really want us to be on the best possible terms with the ALC, because if we propose an institutional use on the ALR land, we'd have to go to the Agricultural Land Commission and say, may we please use this for whatever town facility we want to use. So I do think showing a little bit of deference is not a bad idea. And the other thing too is that, you sort of go in 2 directions. If you go down Rupert Road, it's just residential with large lots along the way, so that's consistent with that. But we do have the fire hall right beside it, and it is an interesting opportunity. Now, obviously, land conversations are in camera, so I'm not going to go too deep down that rabbit hole. But I would actually think, even though Mr. Sales is quite correct, we could rescind all this process if the province, the ALC, sorry, the chair changed their mind, which I doubt would happen because the letter starts on page 68. Everyone can read it, and I was surprised by it. I didn't think they would allow it, but they did. So I do think it's like what's being proposed is reasonable, but I just suggest that I'd prefer it if we did this after that 60-day waiting period. And then I don't have a problem with the project, so if anyone's involved with that and is here, I don't have a problem with the rezoning. That's not the issue. It's just more, I really don't want the ALC to get their nose tweaked in any way, shape, or form by anything we do.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Vander.
Thank you. I just was wondering, on page 67, the applicant's representative says, near the bottom, we look forward to working with you on this project. We anticipate conversations regarding specifics for the new zone. This is a new zone that's specific for this property, and I'm wondering why we have not, or I couldn't find any specifics about what is this zone and what are the requirements for the zone, because it's just being outlined as it's going to convert the garden center, the existing garden center, into residential, but doesn't say anything about the specifics of the residential.
Mr. Seals?
Thank you. So for clarity, are you looking for details on how it would be renovated into a dwelling, or are you looking for the actual zoning designation?
I'm looking for what is involved in the zoning, because it is a site-specific zoning. So I don't believe we have any details on that, what it is.
Yeah, you're referencing that line that says, we look forward to working with you, and we anticipate a conversation regarding specifics for this new zone. So what does that mean? What does that entail?
Thank you. So through the chair to Councillor Vander, this property is unique because it has 2 existing residential dwellings on it currently, and the proposal is to add a third. And it's unique in that it's outside of the urban containment boundary, so it's a rural use. So the town didn't have any existing zones that would accommodate 3 residential dwellings on a single parcel. So a new zone was required. And so at the time that the letter was written, which was quite a while ago, at that point, the discussion had not yet taken place as to exactly what that zone would be. So since that time, the zone is before you today. So if there's any further clarification, by all means, we can provide it. But that reference from the letter is quite a while ago, and I think that clarity has been provided since that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seals. Councillor Vander.
Yeah, I'm just wondering then, I don't know anything about the zone, so I don't want to change the zoning to that zone other than the fact that it allows one more family house on it, single-family dwelling on it, than other ones. I just would prefer some clarification as to exactly what is going to be allowed. Are we asking that they renovate the existing building, or what? So if I could get some clarification on that, that would be appreciated.
Sure. Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Vander. So the decision to renovate or construct new, the town doesn't have a firm commitment from the applicant at this time. So if that's an important factor in council's decision making, it may be something that we need to provide some clarity at a future meeting. So there's been a few questions here that are very good, and I don't have the answers here before you to answer, like right off the top of my head. I can't speak for the applicant. So with council's indulgence, I think what I would propose is that maybe 2 readings be given today, and we can find the additional information and bring this back after the 60-day period has terminated. So kind of accommodating a few of the questions and concerns that have been brought up today. So that would put a final decision perhaps at the March meeting.
I would suggest we defer this so that at least a 60-day timeline has passed. I'm not sure when that is. Would that be the next meeting? Do you know?
60 days from the date of the letter. Let's see. Scrolling quickly. January 8th, so that would be March 8th. So that would be the March meeting.
I move that we defer this to the March 13th meeting. Okay. Second, Councillor Skipsey, discussion on deferral. Councillor Harrison.
There was one last point I wanted to make. It's a little bit of an outside thing, but I guess I'll just send it up as an email to staff, because technically we're only allowed to debate the deferral.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So on the motion to defer, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So it's deferred to March 13. Thank you. All right, zoning amendment on 630 Hemlock Street. Mr. Sales.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda, zoning amendment for property at 630 Hemlock. The star on this diagram in the presentation notes where it is. So it is within the village neighborhood in the mixed residential area. So it's an area where the town has considered and endorsed increased residential density in the past. The proposal is to take a single residential lot and to create 3 parcels, each of which would include a house and a suite. So there would be 2 residential dwellings on each of these lots for a total of 6 on the existing parcel. This is a perspective rendering of what these 3 dwellings might look like. So this would be the side fronting the road, fronting Hemlock, and then this would be the side, you know, with the garages, which is fronting the rear laneway. So I do want to briefly touch on a bit of what we talked about during the last item, which is regarding the need to state whether something is in compliance with the official community plan, because that does change the process moving forward. So a few factors we already talked about, that the town is not permitted to hold a public hearing for a process if it's in compliance with the official community plan. So some rationale and like details on why staff are confident that it is within the official community plan is that currently this is an area intended for densification, and so that the density proposed is within what the official community plan would contemplate. And it's also important to note that with the pending Bill 44 changes, as of June 30th of this year, this single parcel would be allowed to have 4 dwellings on it. So if you look at the site plan that we were considering earlier, so essentially they could have exactly this as of June 30th. The only difference would be that they couldn't necessarily have these additional suites. One of them could have a suite, but once you add a 5th unit on there, you'd be exceeding what will be permitted by right as of June 30th. So, and that also states what we will be looking at by June 30th, in that because the town will be required to create a new residential zone with increased density and also reduced setback, at this point, staff would anticipate that the residential 21 zone that's being created by this application would no longer be necessary and would probably be removed from the zoning bylaw as a housekeeping amendment. So council may wonder, well, then why are you creating it in the first place? Because it is a short period of time. However, for the applicant, there's a few factors. One, they would like to subdivide these into 3 parcels rather than having them all on 1 parcel. And Bill 44 doesn't actually have any legislative requirements regarding reduced subdivision requirements. So Bill 44 may get them the additional units and the density. It may look exactly the same, but they couldn't actually have 3 parcels after June 30th. That wouldn't come either. And then secondly, you know, local government time sometimes moves a little bit slower, and we think, well, June 30th is coming anyway, you know, we can just wait. But for the property owner, that's a long period of time. So as a way of accommodating their need to advance on this property, we have introduced this idea of creating an R21 zone, even if it is only for a period of 5 months. And these are more official community plan policies. So as I stated, 60 dwelling units per hectare is what's endorsed in the official community plan, and this is in compliance. So the recommendations before you today, that the zoning amendment bylaw be introduced and read a first time. Secondly, that council confirms that the zoning amendment application does comply with the official community plan. And thirdly, that there will be a sidewalk reserve contribution for this property equivalent to the value of constructing a sidewalk. And then finally, that a Section 219 covenant would be registered on the property prior to adoption. And what that does is it would ensure that after they subdivide this into 3 parcels, that they suddenly can't get 4 residential dwellings on each parcel, because that's clearly not, although it's not their intent, it's also not council's intention in moving forward with this amendment by law. So with that, if there are any questions, I will take them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
And just to reiterate a point that Mr. Sales made about the fact that you wouldn't subdivide beyond 4, BC's legislation is modeled to some extent on legislation that's passed in the state of California several years prior. And it didn't quite result in the impacts they wanted because the state government in California said you're allowed 4 units by right, but they didn't say anything about the buildings. And so local governments who didn't want anything else said, fine, you can allow 4 units, but you have to have the exact same buildable area, right? So if you look at those lots, if you were to subdivide it 4 ways, you'd have like 400, 500 square feet homes. I don't think anyone would pay the cost it's going to cost. Like it didn't work in California because what you get with that small amount of buildable space is nothing that's economically viable. No one's going to pay the amount of money it's going to cost to buy that when you have no space. It just doesn't work, right? So I think having the subdivision, I understand, initially I was a little bit concerned too about the dividing it 4 ways, but when I actually started thinking about it and looking at the example of California, it doesn't work in the real world. Nobody wants to live in, $400,000, $500,000 worth of 500 square feet. It just doesn't really work that well. So I do think that this is pretty prudent all in all. It does align with the OCP. It's someone in town who does good work, so I don't have a problem with any of this.
Further discussion, questions? Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Vander.
Yes, I'm just a little in need of clarification as regards Bill 44. So you are saying that we can't have a public hearing because Bill 44 is in effect, but that you don't think we should wait until June 30th for this project, but June 30th is kind of this Bill 44 is already in effect, is it not? So why would we be waiting necessarily? So it seems to me it's kind of half in and half out, and I don't think you can do that. I think you either have to be all in or all out, and we can't be all out. So I think we need to be all in.
Mr. Sales.
Thank you. I'd be happy to clarify this one. So Bill 44 does 2 things. Well, it does many things, but we'll just deal with the 2 right now. One is it requires local governments to allow 4 residential dwellings on every parcel, and that zoning bylaw amendment has to be adopted by June 30th. So that's one deadline. However, the legislation also put in place the provision that says you cannot have a public hearing for something that's advancing residential zoning and is in compliance with the OCP. And that took effect immediately. So there's 2 parts to it, and they had different implementation timelines. So as soon as the province adopted that legislation in late November, the public hearing legislation was in effect immediately. But June 30th is the deadline for the zoning amendment requirement. So the reason it's relevant to this one is, as stated earlier, the applicant could wait until June 30th, after which time the town had already amended the zoning, and then they could build these 3 dwellings. However, as I described earlier, that doesn't work for their timeline, and it also doesn't work for their intention to subdivide this parcel into 3 so that each of them would be independently entitled without the need for a strata. Thank you.
Councillor.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Did you have a follow-up question, Ms. Van der Valk?
Not a follow-up question, but another question. Just out of a concern for the trees that are in the lane, it seems to me that if we waited until Bill 44, that there would be more possibility of not having to remove all of those trees that are in the back lane. You could have a different design that is not so compact. And
Yeah, so you're saying if we wait and they can build a fourplex on the lot that they have now without subdividing it first, right? Mr.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Vander. So, this is kind of going into the applicant's realm, but I would presume that if they wanted a fourplex, they would have applied for a fourplex, right? And so this is the specific design that they would like to advance. Certainly, if after June 30th, they could configure 4 units in a number of different ways, perhaps creatively on the process or on the property. However, this is what the application has come before council with the 3 units, 3 residential dwellings with 3 suites. So can't speak for the applicant, but I don't think that's their intention or preference to build a fourplex.
No, I think the point is it was a single building, a fourplex, that more trees would be saved on that property.
Thank you. So if there were a alternative design that didn't have rear access, could there theoretically be a scenario where the trees in the laneway could be retained? Yes, theoretically that is possible. I would just point out, though, that the council and the town does have a policy that twofold. One, in the official community plan, it encourages access off the lane wherever possible. So that's kind of the policy fundamental. Whenever an applicant starts to advance a design, they're looking at providing access off the lane. And the town also has a policy regarding development of the laneways that makes it available to residents that wish to have vehicular access to the rear or side of their property via a laneway. So it would be a departure from policy if the town were to not encourage them to use the laneways for the purpose that the town has previously stated.
Okay. Councillor Harrison?
Oh, yeah, and just on the laneway thing, I remember that came up in the previous term once or twice, and Mr. Sales is quite correct. It is explicitly in our OCP about how we want to have laneway access. If we wanted to change that during this iteration of OCP, update, we can do that. But for now, it is technically our OCP. And part of the things, too, is that by having access on one side, then you lose trees on the other side. So you sort of got to figure out how do we mitigate the loss, certainly, but it's not like it's one side has a loss and the other side doesn't. But yeah, I think everything here is pretty reasonable. This is pretty consistent with the surrounding area, and it is consistent with the OCP. So I guess we should probably start moving things.
That is the idea, if you want to move first reading, and only first reading, and all the other things have to fall into place then. And from my personal observation, I prefer having this look, the top as part of this design, and not having homes with all these great big garage doors when you come into an area, into a street, and all you see these big doors. I liked access through laneway like this design. I think that was deliberately encouraged in our planning in the past, so that we wouldn't have coming into a street and all you see is these big doors. I liked the way these units are designed. There's several examples of them already in town, and I think it adds, in my opinion, to the character of how we build things compared to other places where they have these great big garage doors in front. So, Councillor Vander.
I'm just wondering if, since we can't have public hearings, can we still have the APC review this?
Yes, thank you through the chair. That is still an option available to council. Advisory Planning Commission still serves at the pleasure of council.
Thank you.
Okay, so were you moving first reading, Councillor Harrison?
Certainly, yes, please.
Okay, is there a second there? Councillor Young seconding, Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I guess I thought that this might be a great test case for Bill 44 and to see how it is going to impact the town and development going forward. And I do note that since the last time it appeared on the agenda, the covenant was added to the recommendations. However, I do know, and I think we all know, that covenants are not necessarily permanent, that they can be removed, and I have seen that in town where there have been covenants placed on properties and then later removed. So I do have a bit of a concern with the use of covenants. And also, well, I guess the fact is that they could build up to 4 units on each of these 3 lots, is my understanding. Is that?
Well, if you have no faith in the covenant, as you seem to doubt how strong that is, but with the covenant, Mr. Sales, how firm is that? And can there be other measures, wordings that satisfy the concern that this could become 3 lots with 4 units on each?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. So I'm not aware of any occasions where a covenant has been removed without the authorization of council. So that would be unusual. It's an extremely powerful legal instrument. So, barring any circumstance where the province, takes that tool away from local government, it is an extremely powerful tool, and I'm not aware of any occasions where it's been removed without council knowledge.
Thank you. Any further discussion? It's been moved and second for first reading. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And with the first reading, then there is these number 2, 3, and 4. So can I have a motion to deal with number 2? And do we need to do all that now, or can we do that after we've done our second and third reading?
Thank you. You could, I think it would be best to do the official community plan portion at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Van der Valk?
Actually, I'm just wondering when I can refer it to the APC, because I would like to see it go to the APC. Does that not usually happen after the first reading?
Yeah, usually after first reading, it would go to the APC, but that doesn't prevent us from doing number 2, 3, and 4. So if we want to proceed with that and then send it to the APC, you could make that motion. All right? So on number 2, any discussion? All in favor? Was that moved and seconded, Ms. Spencer? No, I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. And number 3. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Number 4. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carries. And then you can make a motion that it be referred to the APC.
I'd like to move that this be referred to the APC.
Councillor Skipsey seconding. Discussion? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so I actually don't support that because we've seen so many of these residential developments. I've never heard any complaints about any of them in about 5 years. So if it was a large commercial building, absolutely, it should go to the APC. If it was a unique building like some of the ones that were very controversial in the last term, that should go to APC, or a large project like Pheasant Glen. But this is essentially just the sort of standard infill housing we've been seeing for about roughly a decade really in town, in that village neighborhood area. So I don't see how it deviates from that.
So Mr. Sales, would this normally have gone to the APC on 3 homes or 3 lots?
Thank you, through the chair and to council. So it is for 3 single-family dwellings. Now, currently, the town's development permit area guidelines exempt single-family dwellings, so it could certainly be argued that doing a design review on single-family dwellings under the current kind of regulatory scheme is not appropriate. So it could go to the Advisory Planning Commission. I would note that staff haven't recommended it, similarly to the comments from Councillor Harrison, just because it is 3 single-family dwellings that are relatively consistent with a lot of the buildings that have been built recently, and every time those have gone to the Advisory Planning Commission, there's generally been endorsement moving forward. So if council does choose to refer it to the APC, we'll try to expedite that process so it doesn't hold up the applicant and delay the process. However, it's not staff's recommendation at this time. Thank you.
Right. I just want to point out when a very similar, well, the same designer did the units, villas, cottages for Pheasant Glen. I think the APC was very much in favor of how well that was done. And this is in a similar vein, so I don't think it's necessary, because I heard their comments about these units and actually commented that the designer of the lodge and the restaurant should talk to the designer of the cottages. So I think it's fine. I think the issue is more, do you trust the process that if we subdivide it, that we don't all of a sudden get sideswiped to say, well, we want 3 4-plexes now. I don't see that happen. I know the people involved, that's not an issue for me. Whether it goes to the APC, I think, in my opinion, will not change anything, because I've heard their comments about these designs for other areas, and they're very similar. So if it doesn't hold them up, and it doesn't sound like this would, because we have many other things to do, so between now and finishing the process, if council wants to get their opinion, I'm not going to be opposed to it, but I don't expect anything to change from that.
Yeah, well, I just add that, maybe this is similar to housing that we've been seeing over the last number of years, but the world is changing, and, with climate change and being more sustainable, maybe there are things that can be done or recommended that would improve sustainability going forward.
All right. So on a motion to refer to the APC, when would that take place, Mrs. Ailes, on the agenda?
We would have to poll the APC members for availability. So usually, ideally, it's on either the first or the third Wednesday of the month. So we would have to reach out to make sure that they're actually available, because they don't attend a meeting every first and third Wednesday. It's only when required. So they do have lives outside of APC. We'd have to check.
Well, they may like to get together, as if done that often, asked very often. So with that, all to refer to the APC, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Young, Councillor Harrison opposed. It passes. Thank you. So with that, the first reading of our financial plan, Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. The staff report with respect to the financial plan bylaw included on today's agenda supports first reading of the Town of Qualicum Beach Financial Plan 2024-2028 bylaw number 789-2024. The report recaps financial plan discussions. The report and both the bylaw actually recap and include discussions and decisions that have occurred at the Committee of the Whole meetings regarding the financial plan. Section 165 of the Community Charter requires that each municipality has a 5-year financial plan authorized by bylaw annually. The planning period for the financial plan is 5 years, with that period being the year in which the plan is specified to come into force, and the following 4 years. This is represented by Schedule A, which is attached to the bylaw in your agenda. The financial plan must set out the objectives and policies of the municipality for the planning period in relation to each of the funding sources, and those being property taxes, parcel taxes, revenues from fees, revenue from other sources, and proceeds from borrowing, and the proportion and total of revenue that's proposed to come from each funding source. It's also required to show the distribution of property value taxes amongst the property tax classes that may be subject to the taxes, and the use of permissive tax exemption. And this information is contained in Schedule B of the bylaw in 3 different sections there. Council must also take in process of public consultation regarding the proposed financial plan before it is adopted. Public consultation on the financial plan occurred at a number of Committee of the Whole meetings from October 2023 through to January 2024. The next slide here details the financial plan consultation process. So details of the financial plan, including the operating budget, schedules, departmental service overviews, capital plan details, workforce planning, reserve schedules, strategic initiative schedules, and impacts of the required property tax increase were discussed at the January 17th and January 24th Committee of the Whole meetings. A preliminary budget discussion and presentation by staff to council and the public occurred on December 13th at a Committee of the Whole meeting as well. Council strategic planning sessions were held on November 10th and 15th. Both were open to the public and held at committee of the whole meetings. And a budget background presentation was made to the committee of the whole and meeting on October the 24th. So as you can see from this slide, there's been extensive public consultation that's occurred on the 2024 to 2028 financial plan. This next slide shows a recap of the 2024 financial plan contents, which have been discussed in detail at each of these meetings. So the financial plan includes an increase in the contribution to asset management reserves equivalent to a 1.5% of the previous year's tax levy. It also includes a $50,000 contribution to the asset investment reserve, which is to be used to fund accessibility initiatives in the capital budget on an annual basis. The town workforce, which is comprised of exempt staff, QP employees, paid on-call firefighters, and a variety of program contractors. Policing is provided through provincial police contract by the RCMP. The staff complement is gradually increasing in line with changes in the operating environment and added responsibilities and services and public expectations. The proposed 2024 budget includes budget provisions for the following positions, which have been approved by council and address added responsibilities and public expectations. So in operations, there is a provision for an engineering technician, a custodial position, and an airport manager for 3 days a week. In fire services, there is a provision for an emergency vehicle technician. In planning, the planning and engineering assistant position, which was approved in last year's budget process, you're seeing a half-year impact in the 2024 budget for the funding of that position. And the proposed budget also includes a provision for seasonal support in parks in advance of the service level requirements for Parks and Green Spaces report, which will be presented to council. The budget includes a 0.7 FTE request, and that's the minimal amount of additional resources that's anticipated to be required in parks to meet service levels. There are also provisions for insurance and legal costs reflected in the 2024 budget, and the provision for legal costs is adjusted to reflect the growing complexity and potential liabilities related to municipal operations. The insurance provision reflects the insurance premiums required to make sure that town assets are adequately insured. Other cost increases for which budget provisions are included address licensing costs for computer software, increases in IT managed support costs, and cost of materials and supplies such as road painting. Road paint costs have increased quite significantly. Janitorial service costs for town-owned facilities, including beach washrooms and some public washrooms. The 2024 budget has taken into consideration the anticipated cost of new construction revenue and adjustments to lease revenues, which mitigate the impact of the required property taxation increase to balance the budget. And next slide shows here that after taking into consideration all of the non-taxation revenue, including revenue from new taxation, or what I referred to as new construction, the increase in property taxation revenue required to balance the budget results in an increase of 7.7% from the previous year. This impacts the municipal tax portion of the average household assessed at $956,000 in 2024 by $164, or just under $14 a month. The average household would pay $2,302 in municipal property tax in 2024. In terms of a percentage increase, the breakdown of that 7.7%, 5.4% would go towards municipal operations, 0.2% towards police services, and 2.1% towards the increase in contribution to asset reserves. In addition to property taxes, it's important to consider that the overall cost to homeowners in the town of Qualicum Beach, which includes the cost required for utilities. So in 2024, for the typical single-family home in Qualicum Beach, the fees for utilities, which include water, sanitary sewer, and solid waste, will increase by $30. So when the increases in property taxes and utilities are combined, there is an overall increase to the typical family home of $194, or 6.1% over 2023. So the net impact to homeowners is 6.1% when you take into consideration all increases. And this it's a very short presentation in comparison to the last few, but this last slide here, second to last slide, recaps a timeline in the public consultation that has taken place leading up to today's proposed first reading of the bylaw. The next steps will be second and third reading on the bylaw on February 28th, with adoption of the financial plan bylaw planned for March 13th. And if we can go to the next slide, I'd just like to remind Council once again that this is the final opportunity to request adjustments in the financial plan so that they can be incorporated and reflected in the detailed 2024 to 2028 financial budget book, which we're currently updating. And the budget book will be presented at second and third readings along with the financial plan bylaw. And at this point, I would turn it back to you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I want to first of all thank you and all of staff and the leadership of Ms. Varela for bringing this budget book together and having this extensive consultation process, and very transparent. I just want to look back at the last slide, not the last one, the one before last, that one.
Okay.
So it may be a bit confusing when you see municipal property tax 7.7 and then total 6.1. So the bottom line, which is really the bottom line, it's 6.1, that includes the utilities. Thank you. So the presentation we had today from the curling club, would that have any, I don't think any material, would it have any effect on this budget process?
That will not have any impact on the final numbers. What we will do for transparency and clarity is we've included the budget provisions for the facilities at the curling club in the facilities line item. So we'll break them out and identify them separately in the capital section so that they can be seen quite clearly.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I'm happy to move first reading. And I just had one question.
Okay. Councillor Skipsey, second. First reading, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, and just to echo the mayor's comment, there's a ton of work that went into this. And my question is actually partly because we had so many rounds of public consultation on this. I'm trying to recall something. I'm a bit fuzzy. But we had discussion about beach access. And we added it near the end of the 5-year strategic plan. I can't remember if it was in 2028 or 2026, but I do recall having the conversation. And I just wanted to flag that so that whenever the documents are done, we had that discussion. I'm sorry if I can't recall which of the committees of the whole it was, but just so staff make sure, like, we don't need to relitigate that. I'm not asking to redo that. Just whatever the conversation was, because I remember there was a debate about 2026 or 2028, and I thought we came to a decision. I think Ms. Varela might correct my memory.
Thank you. Ms. Varela.
I'm actually hoping you'll jog mine a bit. So maybe we can go offline. I just want to make sure I'm bringing that correctly back to the table. So if you could just help me with that, Councillor Harrison. Thank you.
Yeah, no, certainly. I just recall Councillor Skipsey and I sort of saying, wouldn't it be nice if it was 2026 instead of 2028? And I thought there was a vote. So I just want to double check that.
Yes, I believe you're right. It was 2026, but we can confirm that. Thank you. Councillor Vander.
Thank you. I have mentioned a couple of times in various processes concern about the streetlight problems that residents have reported, and they haven't been fully addressed for some people. There is not a budget placeholder for possible remediation costs, and should council decide to take further action, do we have a means within the budget to pay for this? Because it's likely to cost more than the $31,000 that we have left from the work that was done already by BC Hydro.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Vander. There is currently, other than the $31,000 that has been carried, the anticipated unused portion that is being carried forward, there is no other provision in the budget. We don't have an idea of what those costs would be. A vehicle that is available for council future decision making, should council have further should there be further decision-making on that issue and council wish to address that issue, we can always open up the financial plan and make an amendment to the financial plan to include such a provision. But at this time, there is no provision included in the financial plan.
On that issue, if I could, we need to close the book on that, so to speak. And we do have a number of people who are still not happy. Can we get some kind of engineer, a third-party luminaire engineer, and show us what they recommend? And we take that to BC Hydro. They have a team that can look at what's possible and complete that process. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just as we did in the last 2 rounds of complaint intakes, we'll be bringing that back for council's direction. The number of complaints will be batched, linked to GIS. Council's next step, if you so choose to proceed, would be to retain a third-party illumination engineer to assess individual lights for potential mitigation. And then they would submit those recommendations through the BC Hydro SLIM system. Again, with what is currently on our plate, I know council's anxious for that, but we'll be planning to bring that back in Q2 with that material for council. The focus has been on strategic planning and budget, Your Worship.
And I totally understand. We've been very busy, but you're very good in laying out the process. So we just follow the process. And if that doesn't satisfy people, I don't know what we would do. But I've spoken with a number of people, including some neighbors across the street, who were very upset with the lights the way they were. And the next morning, I got an email that they're still smiling because they're so happy with the change. And you in your street had some done, and people are happy with it. So I'm not sure what else we can do, but let's take this to the next step in that process. Thank you, Ms. Varela. Anything else? Go ahead. I'll go around. I get one question, then we'll come back to you. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I did find Councillor Harrison's improve accessibility to the foreshore in the package that we did through strategic planning, and it was 2028, but town will consider advancing initiative earlier as opportunities arise. But then also in this booklet, and I was going to bring this up later related to the website, but under the visual identity refresh, I thought we had decided that that was not necessarily maybe as much of a priority, but that we would go ahead with the website, and instead of the 50,000, it would be 30,000. But now I see it's now 50,000 in the budget. So if we could get clarification on that.
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll take round 1 and then I'll hand it off to the Director of Finance. So there were 2 distinct projects. One was the website and one was the visual identity refresh. Council considered both of those projects and decided instead of proceeding with the whole visual refresh, you would only do a small piece of the work that was related to the website. So while they are 2 distinct projects, they are linked in that the visual refresh piece will be enough the work that it can inform the website refresh. So I hope that adds some clarification. As far as the budget numbers, I'll refer to the director for that.
Thank you. Your Worship, through you to Councillor Skipsey, in terms of the budget, so the website redesign originally had a $50,000 budget in 2023, and that was carried forward to 2024 through strategic planning. So the money was not spent in 23, and RFP is being issued in 24 for that. And just going back to the discussion in strategic planning, the visual identity refresh originally had $50,000 a year in the years 2024, 25, and 26. And council decision was to put 30,000 in 2024 and then 20,000 in 2025. And the other 50,000 provisions were pushed out a year, so they were in 26 and 27, I believe.
Councillor Vander Valk?
I'm just wondering, it may be more pertinent to our discussions from the airport review, but I wonder, is there a breakdown in the budget about any costs specific to the airport in terms of revenue and expenses?
Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Vander. There is in the operating section, the airport section has a financial table that shows revenues and operating expenditures for the airport. And the level of detail is consistent with the level of detail that is reported on operational expenditures.
Thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, just 2 points. So one is just to follow up on the discussion of streetlights. If council decides we're going to take a course of action halfway through the year that we're going to allocate more funding for something, we can do a budget adjustment. So even though we're finalizing this budget, that doesn't mean that we can't do anything for the rest of the year. It just means we have to have an extra conversation when we're doing that. So just to sort of allay that concern that, if it's not immediately here, there are still processes by which we can get that done in a more timely fashion. You wouldn't have to wait till 2025. And the other thing is, just to follow up on Councillor Skipsey's point, she's right, because that is what I said. I just wasn't sure if the 2028 was the original staff recommendation, and then that conversation was recorded, or if we just talked about it and we didn't actually move anything as a council in the recommendation. That's why I'm really fuzzy, so I'm gonna have to go back and check.
Yeah, no, I think the description of the conversation was more like we're doing it in 2028, but if opportunities arise, we do it sooner. So with the emphasis on trying to do it sooner if possible. Anything else? So for first reading, are you ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Carry unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hare. We're not finished yet with you. We'll go on. The next one is a government and liaison reports. Committee reports. I want to say something about that. One time, I think I put in everything I did, every meeting I attended, every conference I went to, every local organization I attended, but I'm only going to report now on the things that I think, and council does that when you have a notice of motion because something came out of something you attended or something you wanted to do and it's a notice of motion on the agenda, so it was presented to staff according to the timeline. In my case, I'm only going to report on one thing, and that is that the motion to initiate a review or a feasibility study for another regional district pool in Parksville was unanimously defeated. So there will be no discussion, the study report apparently was going to cost about $170,000 and then more if a referendum was needed, which it would be. And the cost anticipated for a pool, the numbers were between 80 and 100 million. And even the two representatives from Parksville who were at the meeting because Mayor O'Brien couldn't be there, they said, no, we got so many other things that we got to do, we're not going to do it. So I hope that the next conversation with the Oceanside Committee will be about adding to the pool in Qualicum Beach. And it's not Qualicum Beach pool. I had a lot of comments from people, it's your problem, it's your pool. It's not our pool, it's a regional district pool within Qualicum Beach. And the reason why we got it, because we offered the land like we do in so many other ways. If you want that service, the best thing to do is, no, we're not going to charge you for the land, or we're not on a credit for the land, is we'll donate the land. And I believe at the time, staff even paved the parking lot. So it's a benefit for us to have a facility like that in our community. And I think to add on to it, 5 years ago it was going to cost about $10 million, but I'm afraid it's going to be more. But I think that's probably going to be the option, if anything, that would be advanced. So that's the only thing I'm going to report. Councillor Harrison, you're next.
Oh, well, just to follow up on that, just through you to staff, I think 2 meetings ago we had a motion about the RDN being a delegation to discuss the pool. We might want to rescind that now because it's kind of moot.
Yeah.
So maybe just on the next meeting, just rescind that motion because obviously they're just going to say, well, I'm glad you heard from the mayor. Great delegation.
No, actually, their delegation may be appropriate if we're going the other way, which is, so let's just wait to see what happens next.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good thing, I guess, for staff to liaise with and figure out what's going on. Okay, so the only real thing was a follow-up for the Oceanside Task Force on homelessness. So there was a lot of conversation because obviously it had been a very busy time. one of the things for funding from the province for warming centers is that apparently there's two funding streams. So one is called EMCR. This is sort of what the town did. This is sort of the emergency 12-hour funding. And the other is sort of winter round, and that's the EWR funding, I believe. The interesting thing that staff would want to confirm is if two communities can do EMCR offsetting at 10 hours, 12 hours rather. So two communities have sort of these short-term temporary emergency shelters, or what was described is that the province isn't really doing that too much, and instead they have one community which has the year-round or winter round all day, and then you have another communities for emergencies that sort of pop up. So that would be a good thing to check. They are sort of trying to figure out, the sense is that there were still some learnings, like it was a relatively successful thing at the church for the emergency shelter. There are still some things that they're sort of learning about for hours of operation and then transportation. There was a bit of a lull where, because it closed at about 6:30, there's nowhere really to go. So a lot of folks would be visiting McDonald's and spending copious amounts of money, and then folks would be worried at McDonald's, and so there's some takeaways from that. There's a notice of motion there. I sort of had a conversation again with the mayor on Monday, and I have it written up, and I apologize to our corporate administrator. But I think for the, oh, sorry, there's two. I'm getting ahead of myself. So for the first one, there is a staff recommendation on the shelter policy. I think it's pretty clear that, and if I'm wrong on this, council can correct me, there was a sense that what we did was sort of something that's okay moving forward. So the only thing with the staff recommendation is, like, I'm fine with the staff recommendation, but the only thing I was thinking is, should we maybe include also like a draft policy with that? Or is this something where we should just have the staff recommendation as is?
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I think having some kind of policy would be good. So, Ms. Varela, how would that work included in the staff recommendation?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we do have a meeting with BC Housing scheduled for March 11th with this regional CAOs, hoping to have some discussions on that. We also had a really good call with staff from Nanaimo, the RDN, Parksville, and Qualicum Beach the other day. We are looking to Nanaimo because they're doing some really great policies that would inform this kind of action going forward. So if we just have a bit of time, we can pull that together, come back, report to council, and we can take direction at that time.
Yeah, but the question was, would we be working towards having a policy or a draft policy for us to consider? Councillor Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So looking to Nanaimo's experience, they actually have multiple policies that are relevant to this. So again, if we would commit to bringing back some tools for council's discussion, and it is very top of mind for staff and getting something back to our respective councils.
Thank you, because I agree with you. We had a lot of, we learned something from the last experience. Thank you.
And I do think that's pretty reasonable too. The other thing I sort of mentioned at the meeting is that I really suggested to Parksville and the RDN representative that they might want to have, at least for the emergency shelter, similar, like we might want to coordinate to have sort of similar language in all jurisdictions, so that if there's no churches in Qualicum Beach next year that can, in a sudden cold snap, that can respond, but there is one in Parksville, that it isn't a last second thing where people are scrambling, and instead it's, okay, here's a checklist and 2 or 3 months ahead. And there is some discussion too about staff in Nanaimo working with the coordinator for the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness to sort of do a pulse check on all the nonprofits, because there's no guarantee that nonprofits are providing services will be available next year. Just because a lot of nonprofits are always chasing after grants, and if you don't get the grant, then that can be a huge impact. So yeah, this is the last thing I just want to flag too, is that ideally we wouldn't just be doing something on our own, we'd be coordinating with Parksville and the RDN as well, so that there's just a clear understanding of the area of what you need to do to make something a success.
And I do have a contact and a facility in the Oceanside area that had a good experience a couple of years ago, and are willing to be reconsidered. So I'll pass that on. That completes your report?
I just moved the staff recommendation then for the first one.
Thank you. And I'll second that. Councillor Skipsey, second that. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
And then the second one, so this sort of stemmed from when we were doing the very controversial OCP amendment, which had the CAC contributions, and half of it were allocated for healthcare. And I talked to the mayor about this on Monday, and he sort of convinced me that the better thing to do at this point is to, let's just sit back instead of saying we're going to allocate it for this one specific purpose, which is something that the Division of Family Practice flagged in the past, but maybe let's get an update on what the Patient Care Network, Flowerstone, and the Division of Family Practice think is the best use. We get a report, maybe in camera, maybe public, about that feedback, and then we can actually, when we have those funds, we can allocate it to the best possible use for the community. And it's a council decision as opposed to, I heard this was really important, so I think we should do this. And then next year, maybe we have a bit of regret. And I have this written up, so my apologies, Ms. Svensson, but just instead of that, I'd suggest as an alternate course that a letter be sent to the Central Island Division of Family Practice, the Oceanside Primary Care Network, and Flowerstone Health Society to request their preferences for how the community amenity contribution originally allocated for healthcare could best be spent.
Thank you, and I'll second that. Discussion. All in favor? Are you voting or are you asking questions? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to report out in my report that Councillor Young and I have been working with the Division of Family Practice and Flowerstone and others on attracting health practitioners to Qualicum Beach. And, we have some short-term goals, but one of the long-term goals is to sort of look at exactly that. So I guess it would be a good fit for our long-term vision.
And it's also to sort of the conversation of, do we want to have a single asset, which encompasses all that, or do we want to look at operational funding, which is contingent just on that one-time CACs? Obviously, the town doesn't provide staffing for healthcare. That's not really our lane, but we do have some money set aside. So it's a great conversation for a future council meeting.
Absolutely, and I think there was talk about subsidizing a rent for an administrator or locums or something like that would use this money effectively. So the motion is clear. Ms. Svensson, did you get that?
I'll send it to you in writing.
Okay.
I haven't written down an email. My apologies.
Okay, but essentially the motion is that we would invite these groups that you mentioned, how they feel we could best use this money. Okay? Okay. So it's been seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
And because it's been so short from the last meeting, that concludes my report.
Actually, have one more. Top of
my gosh.
Page 9.
Which one?
Page 9.
Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to get up with my agenda. Yeah, I think that's something that we can maybe discuss in camera or not. I don't mind either way.
The staff comment is that it would be reviewed in the fourth quarter because I think you've made some good points. So we'll deal with that during the procedure bylaw review.
Yeah, that's reasonable. It's a procedure bylaw thing ultimately, yeah.
So that's your motion?
No, I think the staff recommendation is just that it'll be done, so there's no real need for anything to proceed. I think we just move on to the next liaison.
That works. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I was just going to report out on two things, and I've sort of touched on both of them. One is the healthcare portfolio and just some short-term and long-term goals that we're working towards. And then the second one is working with the golf course, and you provided quite a bit of background earlier in the meeting. We're just at the point now where we're eagerly awaiting more details and information from the company once their geotechnical people have been on site, and also the fisheries. So, but it is looking promising and things are moving.
And thank you. We went on a field trip to Duncan, where this company is located, and I think everybody, including the members from the golf course, were very impressed with the quality of the work that this company does. Councillor Vander.
Mine is included in the agenda. I only had one meeting in that period of time, so I don't have to say anything.
Thank you. You've been very good at that. You submit your report before the agenda gets printed, so that's a good example to use, actually. You're doing very well on that. Thank you. Councillor Young.
I'd like to have a motion to have the town of Qualicum Beach participate in the Friends category of the BC Provincial Communities in Bloom program for 2024.
Councillor Skipsey seconding. Discussion.
No.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Also, one other thing, I had a meeting yesterday with Diane Moran and Susan Luck from the collective, and there is conversation about, wouldn't it be nice if we had a piano publicly available for people to play, for our students to maybe do some of their music on the street, and also to be able to bus. So that's a conversation in the works right now for permission. And also the Rotary, they would like to, for World Earth Day this year, which is April the 22nd, they would like to have April the 20th as the day that we get town support on garbage pickup bags and the clips and on all that, because Rotary would like to participate in that and clean up our community. That's it.
Thank you. And that's been happening now for a number of years, and it's very successful. We provide the GPUs, which is the garbage picker-uppers, and garbage bags and coffee for all the volunteers. And I was truly amazed how many people showed up and how much litter they picked up. I mean, it's kind of bittersweet that you have to go around the streets where people just throw stuff out the car window. It's not a good thing, but for them to go and pick it up in every street they can, and in areas of forested areas, they do a really good job. So as long as staff knows with a date, and the last time we organized it at the parking lot of the train station. That was, I think, the most convenient location for people to work out of. So if that can be arranged, Ms. Svensson, do you need any further comment or answers?
Just a request to ask them to reach out to us formally, because nobody's reached out to us yet. So just so we have a contact. It's no problem doing it,
Yeah.
just so we can get the ball rolling.
Thank you. That's entirely appropriate. Mike Haas was usually the one that coordinated that, so if he would send a letter to staff with the date, that would be good, and what they need. Yeah, thank you. Staff reports. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will hand this over to the airport manager for discussion.
Mr. Goldfuss.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. So, three-phase power. So I'm happy to report that BC Hydro has retained the engineering services of Brecken Engineering. Brecken Engineering is located out of Nanaimo. Staff have met with representatives from Sealand Flight School and Brecken Engineering on January the 10th of this year. And the purpose of that meeting was to have a discussion on infrastructure requirements for the Qualicum Beach Airport and what will it take and what will be required, including location of three-phase power and the location of potential charging stations for the purpose of electrified aircraft. So it is a process that is currently been started. That's all the information that staff have at this time. We are involved in the process, and once it evolves further, we will be informed, and then we'll be able to report back to Council on what the requirements will be, potential costs associated with bringing that type of infrastructure into the airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to Councillor Harrison?
And just through the chair, if I may, to Mr. Goldfuss, are you also keeping the other members of essentially the airport users up to speed on where we're at with this? Just because I think some folks, I know Sealand is one example. I know Tierra over at ISQ has another business where they're involved with that. But I think there might even be additional, like some of the other folks who are already working there, this might be something that they're interested in moving forward.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Harrison. Yes, we will be keeping people informed as this evolves, including all the stakeholders at the airport.
Thank you. One of the things I really liked from the last consultation, well, committee to whole meeting, is that the pilots who have a facility, an hangar, at the airport, invited anyone who'd like to talk with them about their noise or about flight paths or anything else to have a coffee with them. And I think that is a really good step in the right direction where, I mean, we're talking about flying neighborly. There's a plan in other communities that have followed that. And I think starting with anything like that is to have a face-to-face communication. Because it's so easy to send an email and whatever, but actually talk to the people and work as neighbors. So I think I would invite people, rather than coming to our open house about the airport, to go to their open house, which is every Wednesday at 10 o'clock at the airport. I'm just saying that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I think it's a good thing to do. Then there is some more reports that we need to accept, or at least that's the idea. There's 3 staff recommendations on top of page 10. What is council's wish? I would ask that we move all 3 recommendations. Councillor Harrison?
Sorry, I was just going to say we should probably move 1 and 2 to Councillor Skipsey's point earlier. Because 3 we technically already moved. Yeah. Number 3, I think we moved earlier in the meeting. To Councillor Skipsey's point that she made earlier in the meeting, she's correct.
Okay. So which one is this one here, number 3? That's the one we're dealing with? Individually, we sure can. Let's start with 1. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison, discussion. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am okay with receiving this report. However, there are a number of things that were discussed at the committees of the whole that I would like maybe at some point that we could follow up on. And one was a question around whether or not it would be possible for council to develop a policy for a reasonable amount of training per day or per week or per month. So I'm hoping that at some point we could look into that. The second thing is a request around tracking where the municipal addresses of people who are using the airport and whether that would be possible, so that if we wanted to approach our regional friends to support us, that we would have some data to present to them on the number of people from their neck of the woods that are using the airport. And then finally, I had requested or brought up the idea that the complaints be provided to council on a regular basis. And so I would hope that that would happen coming forward. And I think that's it for now.
I think what would be reasonable for, and not just for the report on complaints, but for the fire department, for building inspection and so on, is to do it on, as we have switched with finance. We used to do it once a month to get quarterly reports. And I know it's a ton of work to put these monthly reports together, and we look at them, and once in a while we have a question. But I think if it was quarterly and trended with what happened last year in that quarter, I think it may present more value and a bit more manageable for staff. So that would be my suggestion, that we do it on a quarterly basis. So that's number 1. Did we vote on number 1, Ms. Svensson? No. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Vander.
Thank you. I'm wondering, again, this is something that came up in the consultation process, the possibility of seeing if the flight path can be just to the south, turning to the south. Is there a specific cost attached to, is it possible, and is there a specific cost attached to that?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Vander. So Transport Canada requires for any new noise abatement procedure or an amendment of a noise abatement procedure that extensive public consultation and including stakeholders is extensive, basically. So yes, it can be done. We will require that direction from council. If council wishes to direct staff to start that process, it's going to require a great deal of resources. It will most likely also require third-party assistance to achieve that. So again, as per the TC, Transport Canada regulations, it does require that.
Okay, just turn it to Ms. Barilla.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff were considering doing a workshop for council. So council got really clear on the noise abatement process and related to northbound turns off either end of the runway versus the southbound turns that are related to circuits. And I think there might be some confusion with that. So we'd like to create an opportunity just for council to learn a little bit more, just as we did with the airport generally, but to be very clear on what the noise abatement procedure is, what the opposite turns to that are, and maybe invite the flight school representative to talk about the circuits they do and things like that. So we're going to propose a workshop for you maybe for a bit more learning. So if you could just stay tuned for that.
And I saw the maps of what's currently happened or what's supposed to happen. And I think a workshop would be good, but I think it'd also be good for the community to see that. So prepare that workshop for the public, for everybody. I think it might be helpful for a lot of people. Ms. Barilla?
Thank you, Your Worship. So that would be a really great idea for that potential date we're talking about in June. We would get to council sooner than that, and then we could talk about how to get that information better out into the public, because I really think there are two different pieces there that we want to make sure we get lots of transparency around.
Yes, I think that's, in my opinion, that's the way to go, is to have these more regular meetings. And the next one, it would be in June, to see how things change, and also to get a workshop type thing for the public about what's going on at the airport. So I look forward to setting the time and date for the public to be aware that there's going to be some more education or information regarding what's happening at the airport. Thank you. Councilor Valk.
I just had one more question. It did come up in the consultation that we did that you had 14 requests for helicopter training and only 27 hours at the airport. Excuse me. The 14 requests, was that for only 14 days, or did each request have more days, is one question. And the 27 hours, is that specifically at the airport, or is that total flying hours?
Mr. Goldfuss.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Vander. So in 2023, there were 14 requests for helicopter training at the airport that were approved. Out of that, when they provide a request, they give us a window of how many days approximately. So out of those 14, there was 45 days that was proposed in those 14 requests. And yes, you are correct. There was a total of 27 hours that was involved training at the airport. And those hours are very specific and detailed, and they come from the pilot's flight log.
Sorry, I'm just not quite clear. So 27 hours at the airport, that includes flying, coming back to the airport, or specifically at the airport? Do you understand my question?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. That is 27 hours that is specific at the airport.
Any other questions about this, the first one? Councillor Young.
I've had a resident suggest that possibly we could ask Gord John, our MP, to ask the Minister of Transport in Ottawa to facilitate a Zoom meeting with us on maybe some remedial suggestions that they might have, because we now have compiled all the issues that maybe with his experience overall, that maybe he could have some input for us.
What staff think about that suggestion? And I'm not meaning just Mr. Goldfuss, Ms. Perella. What do you think of that suggestion?
Those are the kinds of questions that would be really great to be provided in advance, Your Worship. I don't like to answer those off the cuff. I'm not sure what the larger implications are. So, yeah, if I can take that away later in March, and perhaps I could have an offline discussion with Councillor Young so I sort of understand the intention more.
Very good. And I just want to point that out to all staff. If there was a question asked that you didn't have prior notice, there's no problem saying, well, I'll respond to that at the next council meeting. Totally respect that. So, Councillor Harrison.
And just 1.2, I know some people are saying, and I've heard a few different things for potential changes to the flight path, but one of them was, can you please revert to what you had before? And just maybe as we're having this workshop, if staff could let us know. My understanding was that we were required to change it. It wasn't a town decision. It was basically a Transport Canada decision, thou shalt change. So if that is the case, that might be very helpful. So when people say, can you bring it back, then we have a solid reason. This is unfortunately why we can't do that, because we were obliged to change it. And I think that's what was happened, but yeah, it'd just be good to have that in writing one way or the other, if staff could provide that at a future date.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Worship. So to be very clear, we wouldn't be advancing any council decision-making or business of the town at a workshop for council. We would make sure that happened in open meeting. But I agree. I think the difference between the northbound turns and the noise abatement procedure versus southbound turns and the circuit are two very different things. So we'll tease that apart with council, and I think that'll provide good insight for us to then take that to the public, and any public decision-making by council can occur in open meeting.
Yeah, and the intention just for clarity, I agree with Ms. Varela. The intention was more just, how did we get here? Is sort of where I meant with that line of inquiry, is that folks could then see how over the years we came to the point where we're at now with our processes.
Yeah, and that's another thing that came out with the report and the facilitator, or not the facilitator, the person we hired to give us more background. What was that fellow's name? He came here a couple of times.
Mr. Rob Bainan?
Yes.
Yeah, he was our consultant.
Oh, consultant, yes. Yeah. That we have a good base of information to start with. I think we're all, before, kind of scratching in the dark what was really going on, but I think we've got a good base of information. So hang on to that report, because that provides a lot of background. Okay, on the first one, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carries. Thank you. On the second one, Councillor Skipsey?
I would like to move it, but with staff to schedule a biannual open house.
Thank you. And the second, Councillor Harrison? Yep, seconded. Discussion? Councillor Harrison?
I actually prefer annual. I think that a lot of these questions are going to be repeated every 6 months, and I think once a year should be enough. I do think having a couple more meetings at first, just to provide that information base, then folks can refer back to that and we can say, please watch this meeting to get all the facts. But I think once we have that going, once a year should be good.
I totally agree. So we're planning one in June, and then I think once people get used to the process, that's how it works. And in the meantime, we still have open houses every month. People can know our phone number, our emails, so we're not going to not hear from them. But to have a public information meeting during a committee hall where people can participate twice a year to start with, and then eventually maybe one will be enough. So biannual to start with, that's the motion. Councillor Harrison? Sorry, Councillor Harrison. Ms. Varela. I think we should get ready for lunch here soon.
Your Worship, there is a significant amount of staff capacity that goes along with preparing and implementing these open houses. Of course, staff serves at the pleasure of council, but I think it's worth considering that when you're undertaking your decision making. And if you would like us to try the first one and then to make that decision about a biannual actually after you see that, it might influence your decision making. But we would commit to getting one in the first, hopefully June of 2024, so first half.
No, I think that's excellent. I think we're speaking from the same sheet. So the motion is to have a next committee of the whole meeting or open house in June. Okay.
I just want to be clear that Councillor Skipsey moved that it be biannual. So are we voting on biannual or?
Well, the thing is this. If we think after one or two of these meetings, we only need one a year, we can change that. But right now, the motion is biannual.
And are you seconding that, Councillor Harrison?
Oh, no.
Okay, I didn't think so. So can I have a seconder for biannual?
I'll second that. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Harrison opposed, and you're opposed? Okay, Councillor Young opposed. It carries. Next one. Did we deal with, how about number 3? Did we deal with all these ones already?
Yeah, that one's already dealt with.
Yeah, okay, Ms. Barella. So, so then we have the contract for the website. Who wants to speak to that? Ms. Svensson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So on page 124 of your package, there's the report from staff on the tender award for the website design, and council's being asked to look at the recommendation from staff with council award the contract for the Town of Qualicum Beach website redesign to Kimbo Design in the amount of $43,800.
Thank you. Questions, comments, motion?
Yeah, I move the staff recommendation, and then I just have one question.
Okay, seconded, Councillor Vander. Go ahead, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the breakdown on how it's graded. And the 5%, which says local context, there used to be a different term. It was social procurement, I think? So that's essentially the same thing, just checking? Okay, because we were technically, I think, the first community in BC to do that. It's us and, we were first, okay, yeah, it was really close, but yeah. I just want to check that still, basically, that's what the policy is, and that's what it's referring to.
Through the chair to Councillor Harrison. Yes, unfortunately there wasn't anybody as local as here, but I did have the conversation with Councillor Vander earlier in the week. We had a lot of applicants apply from the United States of America, so obviously those were not local. There was Kelowna, so this is a Vancouver company, so in our mind it was very local, given what we were given for the applications that we received.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded for the discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Special events. Ms. Svensson?
Sorry, I was flipping pages. So the report is prepared by Ms. Gould on page 126 to 131 of your package, and there's recommendations there for several events that are proposed to take place in 2024, and we're asking for council resolution to grant permission for those events.
So we move all 5? You know, this is how this works. We can pass this in about a minute, but it takes a lot of work to put these together for staff and every organization that's involved. So I always kind of intrigued that we can, move, seconded, done, but I know, I've seen staff and the volunteers that get involved. This is a wonderful thing in Qualicum Beach to have these events, but I want to commend all the people who work with the street dance, with the grad parade, arts and culture, St. Andrew's Lodge. One time, I think Councillor Skipsey was there with me. They were doing a garage sale, and it was just an incredible amount of work. And I don't think we'll see that again in a fundraiser like that, but we'll see other fundraising events. And the folks that are doing it, there's a lot of dedicated people, many volunteers for each of these events, and I just want to salute them. All right. It was moved and seconded. Yeah, it was seconded. So all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Then the radio broadcast request.
Yes, so there's a resolution, page 11 of your package, and it's just a request from 88.5 The Beach to promote the fundraiser Coldest Night of the Year.
Okay, and just to follow up what I said earlier, how much staff time would there be involved, do you think, for accommodate this?
This one is minimal. They're just proposing to use the area at the Clock Tower Square, so we just have to give access to power at that location, and very minimal staff impact.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Councillor.
Is it 5:30 a.m. to 10 a.m.?
That's correct.
You got to get up early, Councillor Young. Okay. So can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And then a notice of motion protocol, which we said we discussed first at an in-camera meeting. So then the development variance permit for 294 Mill Road, Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I do have a slide which provides an overview of this, but all the information is in your package. It's a request to vary the side yard setback on an external lot line from 4.5 meters to 2 meters, and the proposed building that would be located within that area is a greenhouse.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to issue the development variance permit? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, discussion. Councillor Vander Valk.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to why this was an add-on is one thing. And also, it seems to me from the sketch that we have in terms of the location of the greenhouse, there's quite a big space between the end of the greenhouse and the house. And I'm wondering, could the greenhouse not be moved over? Would be one solution. And also, does the greenhouse have to be this size? Is this a greenhouse that has already been purchased and then they realize they don't have room for it? Or can you give me any clarification on that?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Vander Valk. Neither of those questions I can answer at this time. So it may be that the greenhouse is prefabricated, but I would have to confirm that with the applicant. And I also don't have information as to whether they can move it closer to the building.
Councillor Harrison?
Yes, I'm just looking at page 140 of our agenda, where it has a sketch plan, and it looks like the distance between the edge of the lot and the edge of the building is already 4.53 meters, and the setbacks for the lot are 4.5, so that leaves 0.3 meters. If I'm reading it correctly.
Mr. Sales?
Thank you. So I will use the pointer. So I'm squinting at these drawings, as I'm sure you are as well. So Councillor Harrison, the dimension between the outside of the building here and there, you're correct. So that's 4.5 meters. However, the distance between this portion of the building and the side lot line is greater. So if I was understanding the previous question, is as to whether the distance between the main building and the greenhouse could be reduced in this location, and that's the information I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Sorry, Councillor Skipsey.
Well, my understanding is we sent notifications. Did we receive any back from neighbors, any concerns?
Any response?
Yes, thank you. So we did receive one request for additional information. So in particular, it was someone asking whether we had perspective renderings of what this would look like from the street in relation to, say, fences, vegetation and such, and that information isn't provided. A detailed rendering usually isn't part of a development variance permit, and so we have reached back out to the person to let them know that no information is available, but that's the only correspondence that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone in the gallery who'd like to speak to this proposal? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Councillor Harrison? Councillor Skipsey, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm just a bit torn with this one, because if you build a really big house and then you say later, oops, I need room for my greenhouse, I think that kind of planning should happen in advance rather than after the fact. But, and then the next voice, I want to say that, it's important that people do become more food secure, and so growing fruits and vegetables and your own produce is important. So I guess maybe I would like to know if it is possible to have a smaller greenhouse rather than go as big as this one is proposed.
Or alternatively, whether it could be moved closer to the building so the variance wouldn't be required.
Thank you. So I would note a few things. First of all, the greenhouse is only just over 12 feet long, so that's quite a small greenhouse. So they do make smaller greenhouses, but the functionality goes down significantly. The other thing I would point out is that this greenhouse is just over 9.5 feet tall. So the side lot line fence, so at zero lot line, can be 2 meters tall, which is 6.5 feet approximately. So in context of the fence line, I'd just point out that it's actually, this is not going to be an imposing building, so we're looking at something that extends potentially 2 feet above a fence, located 2 meters back from the fence line. So it's not going to be a prominent feature if you're driving or walking past this property. Thank you.
So any further comments? Councillor Vander Valk.
Yeah, it seems like we're spending a lot of time on something that's fairly minimal. Nonetheless, it's more just a comment that if people are going to be planning buildings and the site, that it would be much better if they plan ahead so that we don't have to go through this process of going to council and all the work that's required to say, I need a variance. It's just a comment. So.
Thank you, Councillor Vander Valk. Councillor Harrison.
Just point out too, you can go into our census and look at the date of construction for buildings in town. And this area in particular, most of these homes would have been built in the 1970s and 80s, mostly in the 1980s. So someone who bought this property probably bought it already constructed. I don't know if it's a brand new building. It's a brand new house.
Under
okay.
Construction.
Well, at the same time for me, I mean, I think this is one of those things where it's such a relatively small thing, and it's a greenhouse. I don't think people object to greenhouses. I've never heard a complaint about one yet.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you. But I do appreciate everyone raising their concerns and having a discussion about that. Even though it seems minimal, we are dotting the I's and crossing the T's with every development variance that comes in. I appreciate that. Emergency Preparedness Fund.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. And the recommendation is to authorize the City of Parksville to submit a joint application on behalf of the City of Parksville and the Town of Qualicum Beach for $60,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Harrison, on both points? Okay. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Skateboard development. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So as council and the public are aware, the town has been advancing a conceptual design for a new skate park, which is a redevelopment of the existing skate park. This process has been underway for quite some time, and there's been a lot of consultation with the local user groups and the general public. So I just have a few slides here, but I would note that the entire report is a part of the package. So there's more details if anyone wants to read about it in more detail. So this is an overview of the existing conditions on the lot, and I know it's a little hard to read because of the sun and such, but I'll just point out a few things. First of all, so this is the Civic Center parking lot down here, and this is the skate park up here towards the ball fields. There's a large berm. Whoa, excuse me. There's a large berm between the two that kind of creates an isolation between the parking lot and the skate park. And I think that, I don't know whether that was intentional at the time of construction, but certainly it creates an unnecessary division between those two uses when they are actually very compatible and sympathetic. A few other features, these lines here are what we call in the design world as desire lines. In other words, if you see informal pathways that get beat down more and more over time, it's because a lot of people want to walk there. And that's called a desire line. So we see a few here, one here, and then one here. So the design process has integrated those informal pathways into more formal pathways, because then we can include things like making them more accessible or making them more durable or increasing public safety. So here, this diagram is slightly flipped. So now we have the Civic Center parking lot here, ball fields on this side. So this is a conceptual overview of what we're looking at for the design. As we noted earlier, so that desire line here has now been integrated so that someone in the parking lot can come through past the skate park, which would be on the north side or the right-hand side if you're walking towards the ball fields, and then continue on either to the ball fields or to the skate park. The other feature that serves both the ball fields and the skate park is this viewing area here. So you can sit here on, on a bench or a table or whatever amenities end up at that location. You can look at the skate park, watch people there. You can also face the other direction and face the ball field. So it's actually a great vantage point to see multiple areas. So this is a major amenity, I think, for the general community park overall. Okay, this is more of a detailed rendering of all the features that have been included in the design. And I think if I were to try to describe the types of ramps and features, you would quickly realize I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I won't, but I would just say that the skate park community has been very active in guiding the design process, and this is a result of many iterations of design work. So the designers would propose something and they would say, no, we actually prefer to ride on this type of thing, and so then they'd make changes. So this has been refined a number of times, and the skateboard user group is very happy with the overall outcome. So I don't have a slide, but I would just note that in the report it also states that the budget, as estimated currently by the designer, is $1.5 million, which is the budget that the town has allocated in the financial plan, of which $300,000 is going to be, the raising of that $300,000 will be by the user group. So a few recommendations coming out of this. So first of all, that council receives the report. And secondly, with regard to the fundraising, so the town is not a conventional charitable organization. However, we are able to issue tax receipts, or receive funds, and tax receipts can be issued. So what we're looking for is twofold. One, that the skateboard user group would provide a fundraising plan to the town and that fundraising plan would detail how they're intending to raise the funds, and also provide clarity about the fact that staff don't have capacity to be supporting these initiatives on an ongoing basis. So that fundraising plan will provide a lot of clarity to everyone. The second point here is that the town, would engage a third-party fundraising organization, and I think the organization that everybody's kind of aware of, and it's possible they'll use, is GoFundMe. So for example, when you use a third-party organization like GoFundMe, they track all the donations. They can handle things like the issuance of tax receipts. The town would just need to, essentially authorize that whole process. So that's what we're looking at here. So they would provide donation tracking, receipting, communication with donors, and the ability to refund. So the town's role in this would be to periodically receive and track charitable donations or other proceeds, and I think this is the path that the town needs to move forward with, and it would also enable the skate park to get going on their fundraising. I see them looking over and nodding. So with that, those are the two recommendations before council at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. Councillor Harrison?
I'm happy moving both, or if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. And Councillor Skipsey, second. Discussion?
I just want clarification on the ability to refund on section B here, number 2B. What does that mean?
Yes, thank you. So if you make a donation to an organization that's receiving donations, and then that project doesn't move forward, do the people get their money back? There are circumstances where funds need to be refunded, and it's not a process that the town wants to be directly involved in. But an organization like GoFundMe does have protocols and policies in place to articulate exactly when funds can or cannot be returned.
Okay. And with your money you save, it will happen. Go ahead.
One other thing, could you go back to the slide and show us where the pickleball court might be proposed? Like it was supposed to be kind of adjacent to?
Yeah, yes, thank you. So the pickleball area isn't completely shown in the diagram here. So essentially it would start just to the south of that pathway here and extend down past Ms. Gould's face to about the side of the podium and then come up. So that the pickleball area is less than the skate park. And so if you just kind of transpose that in your mind and move it down between the two parking lots, or perhaps engaging a portion of those parking lots, that's where it would be. So the pathway would actually serve both the pickleball and the skate park, which is a very complementary use. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, I'll start with Councillor Vander.
Thank you. I just wanted to suggest that perhaps the berm was initially placed there for sound abatement, because that would have been or might have been a concern. So it would cut down on the sound to the Civic Center, and might be an idea actually for the pickleball courts. I'm wondering with the GoFundMe, if it were GoFundMe or whatever other body, is there a fee that they charge for that? And I'm assuming that the skateboard park group would be responsible for that.
Yes, thank you. An organization like GoFundMe would have an administrative fee because they accept donations by credit cards, and credit cards also have a fee. So I did look into this briefly, and I believe it's around 3% that an organization like GoFundMe would be charging. And yes, that wouldn't come out of the town wouldn't be paying that. That would be integrated into the fundraising plan.
So the town has no staff time going towards that. Is that correct?
No staff time would not be entirely accurate because there will be some tracking, but that was articulated in the staff recommendation. So we would essentially be periodically receiving and tracking the charitable donations. So there is some staff work associated with that, but not in terms of the detailed process that an organization like GoFundMe would need to undertake.
Thank you. Ms. Barilla?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to reinforce what the director said, that, you know, when anything that comes before council, even if we say, you know, there is no staff time involved, that's not the reality. There will at least be minimal staff time involved, and it's often underestimated the extent of staff time required. This particular piece of the puzzle about fundraising is a lion's share of work, which is why we're recommending the directors will still be involved from a distance.
From a distance. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so just sort of two things. Firstly, on the refund, so like Kickstarter or GoFundMe, they usually have a timeline. And so they want to have a fundraising goal. We want to raise X number of dollars by this date. If they're successful, everything goes ahead. And sometimes if they fail, the money gets reimbursed to everyone. So this sort of the refund is sort of like an automatic process within the website. So again, staff don't have to issue checks to 100 different people. And the other thing too is I remember when my aunt, she had 4 sons when she moved here from Grand Forks, and they were sort of teenagers or in their early 20s back in the day. And she remembered when the skate park was first built and how it was a bit of struggle to get things going. But I do recall from the all candidates, I think we all supported it. I know the mayor had it early on his website right away. So my only question then, just to the chair staff, how long roughly would it take to build this? Just because I think it's something I really want to make sure we get built in this term, because we all sort of said we want to get this built.
Thank you through the chair. I believe the estimate from the designer was 4 months.
And a motion to go after 3 hours?
That's exactly the note I just got, because we're getting close. So thank you. Motion to go beyond 3 hours. Councillor Vander seconding. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Swenson, and thank you for picking up on that. I have a question about this skateboard park. As was discussed, it takes a while to build it, and we would be 300,000 short. But can the project go ahead and say, we can raise money while it's being built? It creates enthusiasm, it creates excitement, and people say, you know, we've got to finish this and get it across the finish line with fundraising. So is it possible, working with this company, New Line Skating, that they would start the process, start the building, and as they go, let the fundraising happen? Is that possible, that they would start it, but perhaps not if it came out that way, they wouldn't be able to quite finish it. Are there elements of the park that could be held until the money was there?
Thank you. So that is a question that's come up. It's certainly not ideal. You lose efficiency when you phase a project like this. A 4-month construction window actually goes by extremely quickly, and a company like New Line would really want to know the full scope of what they're undertaking at the start of it, or their efficiency would decrease. So I think why don't we could reconsider that later. Like if the fundraising isn't proceeding as quickly, or there's some other delay and we're getting close to 2024 and we need to move the project forward, we could reconsider it at this time. But as of where we are right now, which is just at the start of the fundraising campaign, I think the answer should be that we'd like to know the full extent of what we're building before we start actually undertaking detailed design.
So we still have to do the detailed design. Can we not proceed with that? So when the construction period starts, sometime maybe this summer, that we are ready, providing there is the money to do it.
Yep. So a design process it's not a conventional design development followed by a separate construction contract. This is what we would call a design build. So there would be elements of design that would still be underway as they're actually starting the process. What I do think we could consider is going through the selection process to identify the firm to construct it prior to 2024. So we can start the process because it's a 4-month construction window, but it's likely to take at least 2 months to find and select the consultant and design build company that's going to do it. So that's something that we can consider undertaking at the end, closer to the end of this year.
All right, thank you. I've got a couple of hands up. Mrs. Councillor Vander.
I believe that previously we voted to start this process, and with the stipulation only once the $300,000 had been raised by the group. I would be more comfortable keeping it at that myself.
So we'll get some more information about selecting the build design company, but we can't start until we have all the money.
Correct. Thank you. And I'd just like to point out that Mr. Hare has just reminded me that it's already 2024, and I meant to say that prior to the start of 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to have the finance guy there. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
And just to, I'm reminded of the discussion with the track at BYLAWS. And so because it was on school property, it made it really hard to get grants. And there was a discussion at the time of how about we do a phased development, like put in some of the underlay first and then 6 months later do the rest. And the staff strongly recommended against that because it is essentially the stuff that goes underneath then is subject to wear and tear from weather, and it's just a really bad idea. And you have to mobilize crews twice, which adds a lot of extra cost. But just trying to seek efficiencies here, the only thing I'm thinking of, would it be cheaper for both projects if we were to do the pickleball court and the skate park at roughly the same time? So if we had one company, say, doing both roughly the same time, would that then actually be cheaper for the town for both projects?
Councillor, Mrs. Hills.
Thank you, through the chair to Councillor Harrison. That is something we could look at. There are common elements that would be required in both projects. So, for example, some of the preliminary excavation work and establishing those foundation materials. But I would also note that those specific elements have been identified in the report as potentially for an in-kind contribution. So that's something that the skate park user group is likely to be going out and looking for someone to donate that work, because that's not specialized work. That's something that a number of contractors or providers in this area could do. So I think we'll keep our eyes open for opportunity if there is an overlap. It also depends on the timing of the pickleball group and when they have their funding available. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And the Crescent Road East Culvert replacement, who's going to speak to that? Councillor, Mr. Seals.
Thank you. So this is as much a formality as anything else. Council has already authorized the replacement of the culvert at Beach Creek, which Council heard about earlier in the description of the need in terms of the failing culvert and the work that's underway. So because it is in a development permit area, which is the steep slopes hazardous development permit area and the Beach Creek development permit area, council authorization is required. I would also note, though, that this is something that the staff would be bringing up in the future with regard to the delegation of authority, because it is a bit redundant to be asking council for the authorization with the development permit when council has authorized it how many times already? Many times. So that's just something we may want to bring up in the future in terms of improving the efficiency of the decision-making process. So after that side note, the recommendation is that council authorizes staff to issue a development permit for the Beach Creek Crescent Road East Culvert Replacement Project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments or motion to approve? Councillor Vander, you moved that staff that recommendation. Councillor Skipsey seconding. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Well, that concludes our meeting, but we need to go in camera and close, and there are a number of reasons why we do. So, Ms. Svensson, would you want to list the reasons why we go in camera?
Sure. So we'll be closing, asking for a motion of council to close for personal information about an identifiable individual, the acquisition and disposition of land, receipt of legal advice, and negotiations related to discussions respecting proposed provision of a municipal service.
Thank you. So based on that, can I have a motion to go in closed? Councillor Vander, Councillor Harrison, all in favor? We are now closed. We'll take a quick, brief break, and then we'll continue. Oh, good. I was wondering about that.